back in the room. A pleasure to see you guys. As always, this is one of my favorite podcasts that you ever do. And this is very timely because, first of all, the big New York Times article about the possibility of a comet hitting Los Angeles, the preparations for what they would do if a comet hit Los Angeles, and the comet known as Donald Trump that's hit the United States. And
he's even got the hair.
It's just the whole thing is, I mean, if the end of the world was coming, boy, it's all on the wall. You know, the writing's all there. It's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the latest and the greatest?
Well, the latest and the greatest is, I mean, last year when we sat down with you, I think it was last November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was almost a year.
Got floated in the discussion the idea that this really important comet research that's going on, which is just changing our whole view of history and prehistory and of the future of humanity, that it would be good to make a film about this and crowdfund it. I actually mentioned that to the scientists, and they said what we really need is more funding for our research. And so they've inspired basically by your show, they have put out a crowdfunding campaign, which is linked on my website. It's the Comet Research Group, and it's a big story right now.
So how can people find it really quickly? It's Indiegogo.
Well, no,
Comet Research Group.
Much quicker way. Just go to my website, grahamhancock.com, and there's a revolving banner which is the Comet Research Group. Click on that, and you're in business.
Beautiful. Okay, grahamhancock.com. And then crowdfunding for Comet Research. And so what are they trying to put together?
Well, they're wanting to, you see, the thing is, these guys have actually not had any official funding. This is a group of major, highly credentialed scientists who for the last decade have been investigating the extraordinary story of a massive series of comet impacts on the North American ice cap 12,800 years ago. That is the global cataclysm that wipes out a whole civilization from prehistory. So that's why it's of interest to me. They're not coming at it from that point of view. They're coming at it from rediscovering something that we've lost about ourselves, something that's really important to understand the role of cataclysms in the story of the Earth. And they need to do much more research. So they need to go back to Greenland and look for the nanodiamonds in the Greenland ice cores. There's an ancient city which they're not revealing the name of, which they're pretty certain was wiped out by a comet impact about 4,500 years ago. They want to go there and investigate that. So there's a lot of field work they need to do to drive home this hypothesis, and to, frankly, put down the opposition, because there's been so much opposition to this idea from people with vested interest in other theories, and that's why these guys have not got funding. So the only place they're going to get funding to do this further research is from members of the general public, and that's what we're hoping that will happen. It's called the Comet Research Group. There's a banner on my site, and all the links are there to their crowdfunding, to their website, which is full of masses of scientific information, and to their Facebook page as well.
It is a very unusual thing, the fact that we know that comets and all sorts of various large objects have impacted the Earth. We see the craters, we know they exist, but it's so rarely discussed. It's so strange. If it wasn't for this article in the New York Times, I can't remember when the last time it even came up. And it's such a huge issue.
It's a massive issue. It's a massive issue. Both Randall and I have really, given a great deal of thought to this. And I think, Randall, the point is that catastrophes are the untold story of our past.
We were given a little hint of it. February of 2013, Chelyabinsk, Siberia. Remember the event?
Yeah.
Now that was just a little cosmic speck. Came in, it was about 50 feet in diameter, which is about, and it came in at a fairly low angle. It blew up nearly 18.
Get that thing right in front of you.
Right in front of me, like this.
Yeah, if you flatten it out, it's usually easier.
How's this? Is this better?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
There we go.
So it came in, I think it exploded 12 miles, about 20 kilometers up in the atmosphere, but it was still enough to damage thousands of buildings and injure 1,500 people. Now the thing about that one is, if it had been slightly larger, if it had come in at a slightly steeper angle, a little bit higher velocity, you could have had thousands of fatalities rather than just injuries. And that would have been major headline news at that point. As it was, it's already forgotten. But you do remember
Yes.
that event over Siberia? We may even have talked about that.
I
think we did, yeah.
I think we even showed videos of it. Well,
Yeah.
what's fascinating is that Russia has so many of those dash cam photo cameras.
That's right.
Because they have so much insurance fraud apparently over there. People
Right.
slam into each other all the time, and they want to record it. So we're fortunate enough to have so many of those videos because of that.
Which puts it on the record, whereas otherwise it would not be. I think people don't like to talk about cataclysms and catastrophes, and actually nor do I. Nobody wants a horrible cataclysm to occur, but this is the point, which is that the prospect of a comet or asteroid cataclysm on the Earth is actually much higher than has been told to us up till now, and something can be done about it. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. We don't have to, say, okay, it's all over, forget about it. Quite the contrary. This is just something that would be prudent and rational for the human species to do. And amongst many other imprudent and irrational things that we focus on instead, we should be focusing on a bit on this.
Well, at least just to heighten awareness of it, and also the possibility that we've been nailed a bunch of times and we've forgotten about it. And this is the big thing that you've been dealing with your entire career, this skepticism about past civilizations. I mean, I got into it with Michael Shermer, who's a friend of mine, who's a very famous skeptic. I got into him with it yesterday because I posted that you were going to be on, and he started chirping something about civilizations 12,000 years ago. Where's the evidence? I'm like, dude, you're saying this and you don't even know about Göbekli Tepe. So I sent him Göbekli Tepe, and literally like 5 hours later, he wrote something claiming that, well, that was made by hunter-gatherers. It was all just really to sort of suit his narrative. But he doesn't know that. No one knows that.
Nobody knows that. They're so determined to keep the existing model. And when new evidence comes in which can't be explained by the existing model, they just try to explain away the new evidence and not think maybe it's time to change our theory. This is the unfortunate thing. But cataclysms, a global cataclysm, the massive event that happened 12,800 years ago, the Younger Dryas impacts, which were a series of comet impacts on the North American ice cap. This accounts for why we don't have a lot of evidence, hard evidence, of a 12,000 plus year old civilization, because it went down in that catastrophe. It was wiped out.
I've been trying to amass the evidence, actually, that complements what Graham is doing, and it really answers that question that Shermer brought up. And it's a legitimate question. Where's the evidence? But I'm quite sure that Shermer is not really educated in the extreme events that have really taken place on this planet in the last 10 to 20,000 years. And what that would do to any kind of evidence. And maybe while we have some time here today, I've brought a few things to try to convey some sense of how extreme some of these changes have been, and how one would actually be quite shocked to find anything existing in the aftermath of these events.
Well, Michael Shermer's a brilliant guy. And I don't mean to shit on him, but what is disturbing to me is that his knee-jerk reaction to this, without having any research at all in the subject, not knowing at all about Göbekli Tepe, which was discovered in what, the 90s?
Yeah, 96.
So this is, to me, this is something that I've looked at because of you guys in great depth. When I read your book, I was just completely enthralled with this idea of history having some sort of or rise and fall, and civilization having these resets. So I've been absorbed in it for a long time. But what's fascinating to me is people that consider themselves to be skeptical, or I mean, he's a skeptic professionally. Sure. But many people who question anything that's outside of what they've been told, as soon as they hear any sort of a theory outside of what they've been told, they immediately call quackery. And but it's a weird knee-jerk reaction to something, especially when you talk about asteroids, that is a very real part of our past. We have a ton of evidence. I mean, there's actual craters that you can look at on Earth. The moon, which has no atmosphere, is littered with them. And if we look at the moon as a model for what could possibly have happened to Earth, or at least, some of them, obviously with the moon having no atmosphere, it's going to get hit a lot more than we are. Sure. But still, I mean, this is a very real situation that...
Yo, what up, Rolls? How you doing, man?
System,
long time no see, no worries, no stress, no obligation.
We know. This is a real
What's
issue.
up, man? Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being here, man.
Well, it's like you just said. On the one hand, you have Earth scientists looking at the Earth.
I think we're doing natural stuff or bust now.
Each of these scars represents
we have
a
to.
tremendously powerful
I was watching the force stuck, and it's just too slow. It's too cringe.
Science that major catastrophes have happened in the history of the Earth.
I gotta do the
where
force
this
stuff,
thing
I
now
think.
is about to come full circle is the recognition that these kinds of catastrophes have also influenced the rise and fall of civilization, and a lot more.
Where you just run in. Instead of going
more
in the corner and
extremely
shooting in the
than has
darkroom?
been recognized up to this point. And while geologists and earth scientists are looking
Thanks,
at the
man.
surface of the Earth and realizing that
I was watching
etched
some
into the surface of the Earth, or
DX
imprinted into
speedruns.
the surface of the Earth, are hundreds of scars, of which undoubtedly are only
You know
a small
Kratos?
percentage
Kratos, he
of the
actually
total
he
that
runs
exists.
GoldenEye
At the same time, astronomers are
and
looking out into near-Earth space and
DX
discovering
full
that
runs.
we cohabit space with a lot of stuff. It's not as empty as we thought. Just within the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've had 2 close flybys. And
Of previously undiscovered asteroids.
of previously undiscovered asteroids.
This is the point, because NASA keeps saying, well, we've counted 1,650 asteroids, and none of them are going to hit the Earth in the next 100 years. Well, yeah, that's true. But what about all the ones they haven't counted, which are estimated to run into hundreds of thousands and which haven't been seen yet? And what happens is we see them roughly 10 days before they pass the Earth. That is not enough time to do anything about them. But we have time if we're prepared to be rational and reasonable as a civilization to take care of this issue.
Now, when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of near-Earth objects that are flying around, like what are the things that could be done to protect Earth?
You can paint, it's low tech actually. You can paint one side of the asteroid, affect its albedo so that the sun's rays push differentially on one side rather than the other. That will shift its orbit slightly. It has to be calculated. You can give it a little knock with a rocket, basically. You don't want to blow it up. You don't want to turn, your one big piece of artillery shell into buckshot. You don't want to do that. You want to move it into a safer orbit. You can mount jets on it. People are looking now to mining asteroids. Of course, our society always goes, our civilization always goes for where the money's to be made. But if we can mine asteroids, we can move asteroids, and the technology is there.
And ironically, the most dangerous asteroids are going to be the ones that are the closest to the Earth, which are the most accessible. And the asteroids pretty much have unbelievable amounts of resources on them. I mean, pretty much everything that is being mined on the Earth can be found in asteroids, from the hydrocarbons to precious metals to all of these things. And we're not that far away from technologically being able to actually, mount expeditions to asteroids and mine them. And that's the solution I kind of prefer, because again, these things are tremendous sources of all kinds of things that would be usable to an expanding civilization, and we could feasibly, within a decade or two, be mining asteroids. And again, the ones that are the easiest to access are also going to be the ones that are more dangerous, because they're the ones that are coming the closest to the Earth. So,
and another point here is that there is one specific danger. There's one specific, if you like, region of the sky that really needs to be looked at. And this is the region of the sky. This is why I wrote Magicians of the Gods, because of this discovery that there's a thing called the Taurid meteor stream, which is 30 million kilometers wide and which envelops the solar system. And the Earth on its orbit around the sun passes through the Taurid meteor stream twice a year. Turns out the Taurid meteor stream is the debris of a giant comet that came into the inner solar system about 20,000 years ago. That thing was at least 100 kilometers in diameter, according to their calculations. It may have been more so. And then, like other comets like Shoemaker-Levy 9, which spectacularly hit Jupiter in 1994, it began to break up into multiple fragments. And those carry on orbiting on the original path, and as they break up more and more, they degrade, and small bits and large bits break off, and it gradually fills up a kind of huge hoop of debris that the Earth is passing through twice a year. It takes us 12 days to pass through it. We do 2.5 million kilometers a day on our orbital path, 12 days to get through the Taurid meteor stream. And the scientists of the Comet Research Group have made the point that a big object out of the Taurid meteor stream, multiple objects as a matter of fact, was what hit the North American ice cap 12,800 years ago. It looks like there was a second series of impacts 11,600 years ago from the same source. It looks like there were other impacts in the Bronze Age. The most recent, almost definite impact out of the Taurid meteor stream was Tunguska in Siberia back in 1908. That hit on the 13th of June 1908, and that's at the peak of the Taurid June shower, when we passed through the Taurids in June and in November. And what they're saying is we really need to focus on this Taurid meteor stream. Their calculations are that there are hundreds and hundreds of massive objects in that Taurid meteor stream. And you know, as a comet breaks up into bits, those bits become asteroids, and those asteroids are circling in the Tauride meteor stream. And I've likened it to strapping on a blindfold and crossing an 8-lane interstate twice a year, and just hoping that we don't hit any heavy traffic, you know, that we meet bicycles or motorcycles rather than trucks. But the trucks are out there, and what the Comet Research Group scientists are saying is we need now to be in-depth investigating the Tauride meteor stream, because it appears to be the hidden hand in human civilization. It has wiped out episodes of our history in the past, and there's no reason to expect that it won't do so again unless we do something about it, because the remnants of that original giant comet are still circling in the Tauride meteor stream, and they are fucking dangerous.
Now, how is this being received in mainstream science? I mean, is there any resistance to this? Because it seems like this is all pretty straightforward and traceable.
Mostly being ignored.
Mostly being ignored.
And why do you think that is?
By scientists who have a vested interest in other ideas. First of all, there's a vested interest in not admitting that cataclysms are important at all. This goes right back to the 19th century, when science began to take shape in the form that we know it now, and they wanted to separate themselves off, understandably, from superstition. So they didn't want anything to do with something that sounds like the biblical flood, for example. They felt
Come on, like, please.
They preferred to explain any cataclysmic evidence.
I didn't go straight.
So you really think it's because of the
I gotta go straight earlier.
To accept religion or religious ideas, or to separate themselves?
No,
from
I think
that?
that's where it started.
That's where it started.
They wanted to separate themselves off from that. Now they've gone a long way from that, and many scientists have got a vested interest in what is called uniformitarianism or gradualism. And they don't like to hear about cataclysms having any major impact on the story of life on Earth.
So is it sort of the momentum of these initial desires to escape religious influence that have sort of led them down this path?
Yes. And then there are others who have a vested interest in current accounts of global warming, others who have a vested interest in extinctions taking place now. They want to say that our ancestors were responsible for the extinction of all the mammoths and mastodons and so on and so forth. Whereas the Comet Research Group scientists are saying, no, those huge megafauna of North America were wiped out as a result of the massive series of impacts on the North American ice cap.
I'm reading a book right now by Dan Flores, a really interesting book called Coyote America. He's a wildlife historian, and he is really an expert on all the different forms of wildlife in North America, where they originated, where they migrated to. And one of the more fascinating things about it is he's talking about all these animals that went extinct, 10,000 plus years ago, this mass extinction event, and never once does he bring up cataclysms, and there's all these different ideas, and one of the big ones being that human beings with atlatls, which is like really a very weird sort of a spear throwing device, wiped out the woolly mammoths and all these other animals, and
to me,
it
it's
seems
a lunatic.
So preposterous.
It's a lunatic idea. Also, if you have any contact with hunter-gatherers today, you find that hunter-gatherer peoples don't overkill their game. They hunt them respectfully, they take what they need, and they leave the rest because it's a renewable resource for them. So I don't think hunter-gatherers wiped out the mammoths in North America. The evidence is compelling it was the comet.
Well, the evidence that you brought up when you were here the first time, when you showed the images of all those mammoths that had been literally knocked over with broken legs from the impact of something, and mass burial grounds, like these mass... not burial grounds, obviously, but mass casualties.
Mortality sites.
Mortality sites, that's a good way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, in fact, Graham and I visited one up in South Dakota called Hot Springs, where there's just several dozen. Nobody knows how many are actually there, but there's at least several dozen two species, woolly mammoths and Columbian mammoths, that have been entombed. And while we were there, interestingly, the guide, the woman giving us the tour there, was kind of giving a gradualist explanation that, well, over long periods of time, these mammoths wandered into a sinkhole and were too dumb to get out, and so they became entombed. And I asked the question, well, what studies have been done on the sedimentary matrix in which their remains are being found? Because as I'm looking at this sedimentary matrix, I'm seeing a massive deposit. In other words, a deposit that was instantaneous. And when I brought that up, she actually got very irritated. And really? Oh yeah, dismissed my question, didn't, well, we've got it all worked out. We know about that. Well, what is it? Well, we've got it all worked out, and then immediately went on with her narrative But yet I had an article that was actually written by one of the original scientists who worked on the site, and his description was, well, it could have been that, but also as an alternative, and he used the term bloat and float, that what you had was woolly mammoths that had been caught in a flood, drowned, and their bloated carcasses floated into a depression in the landscape, and that's where they were entombed. And that makes a whole lot more sense to me than the fact that, individually over several thousand years, these mammoths wandered into the sinkhole and then couldn't get out. But you got to bear in mind, we're talking about, at the end of the last ice age, 120 roughly species of megafauna that disappeared, which is about equivalent to the same number of megafaunal species that inhabits the Earth today.
It was a short period of time where something like 65% of the North American mammals went extinct.
75%.
75%. Yeah. Very short period of time, right?
Very short period of time. Pretty much totally coincident with that period called the Younger Gyges.
And so there's nothing resembling what we're capable of doing today back then. I mean, when you look at human extinction events, human-caused extinction events, it's very logical. When what we're doing today with pollution and the expanse of civilization and weapons are super sophisticated. If we wanted to, we could wipe out a lot of different species.
Yeah, but what we're actually seeing is that at the end of what's called the Bowling, which was the gradual warming at the end of the last ice age, preceded the sudden catastrophic change in 12,800, which is the Clovis culture that existed for 300 to 500 years, I think.
Yes.
Somewhere. But they suddenly were gone, right? Exactly simultaneous with the mammoths. And then there are interesting studies that are coming out now showing that at least continental-wide, there was apparently a major human population crash, exactly coincident with the megafaunal extinctions, because you had quarries that had been mined for centuries that are suddenly abandoned. You have campsites that had been that had generations of debris and toolkits accumulating and so on, debris from the fluting of the spear points and so on. That are
Like, could you not have just gotten stuck?
So the evidence actually suggests that the human population crashed, which would certainly imply that they would have been far less capable of wiping out all of these species of megafauna. Also, the studies of their diet and their life ways suggest that they were quite diverse. They were hunter-gatherers, and they focused mostly on small game. They ate a lot of fish, a lot of shellfish. They gathered food. And why would they go after the biggest, most dangerous animal, in the whole array of animals?
And with incredible efficiency, hunt them to extinction in 100 years. It doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense.
It seems pretty silly. And
something else from that time, if I may say, Randall mentioned the Clovis culture. This is, for a very long time, really until just a couple of years ago, all of the mainstream academics in fields of archaeology and anthropology were saying there were no human beings in North America before, let's say, 13,000 years ago, give or take 500 years. They came across the Bering Land Bridge. The Bering Strait at that time was above water, sea level was lower. They entered the Americas, then they weren't hit there before. Now, in the last 2 to 3 years, there's just been a whole raft of new scientific research, and no scientist today is prepared to defend the Clovis model anymore. It's accepted, of course, that there have been human beings in America for 50,000, 60,000 years, and there's weird genetic links. Like, for example, there's a trace that connects Aboriginal Australians with North Americans. They had a common ancestor. It's a very peculiar thing that's going on. And so
the runs are looking really good, though, guys. Like, they're looking really good.
Which constrain and restrict research for so long do get overthrown, and that Clovis model is being overthrown. And what the missing piece of the puzzle, I think, for everybody working in this field is the cataclysm, the comet. What happened between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago was changed.
Just got to keep it up.
Is it bizarre to you guys, or frustrating in any way, that this is not a mainstream idea? This is very much fringe, but yet it's not something that we don't have any evidence about.
Whenever I put out a book, immediately there's this huge hostile reaction.
Like the Michael Shermer thing.
Like the Michael Shermer thing. Right? I mean, I would say Magicians of the Gods, which I published in 2015, which deals with this whole comet issue, is actually the most thoroughly documented, the most thoroughly referenced book that I've ever written. It's calm, it's measured. They actually don't read it. They just say, oh, Hancock's brought out another book. He's a pseudoscientist. That's what they always call me, or a pseudo-archaeologist.
Oh, man, I thought he was
and it's obviously
actually
rubbish
stuck.
because it disagrees with everything that we know.
Man.
Well, that's the point of the Heritagian Society.
That was probably
is
our best
to offer
attempt,
an
yeah.
alternative view.
I forgot I was entering right strafe. I'm going to do left, I'm going to do more left strafe.
Such a deeply ingrained mindset, which is connected in curious ways to power structures in our society, that it's very difficult to change it.
Absolutely. And like Graham mentioned earlier, there's kind of it went from a religious motive, I think, in the
Man, this level's like a puzzle,
now it's
man.
more a political motive. And again, the idea that every day you'll find something, coming from various factions that, we're destroying the Earth, and the Earth has never suffered this kind of, assault on it before, and we're causing the 6th great mass extinction, and we're going to cause catastrophic global warming if we pump another 50 or 100 parts per million of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so what that has done is, like many, I won't say many, but several of the scientists now that have been in the forefront of criticizing the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis are also very much involved in the global warming movement and the idea that we are now precipitating the 6th great mass extinction. Having looked now at mass extinctions and been really an obsession of mine for about 30 years now, I've looked at everything from the Cretaceous Tertiary to the Permian Triassic, right on down the line to the most recent one, which to me is really in some ways the most interesting, because the most recent mass extinction that we're talking about is the one that took place while we humans were part of the story. And
between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, the Younger Dryas.
Yes, the Younger Dryas, which is still an unexplained climate anomaly that happened. And I mentioned this, I think, in previous broadcasts, that what you had was
Oh man, that was
spasm
fast.
of extreme warming followed by rapid shifting into extreme cold, literally within a matter of a few years. And we're talking about climate changes that are up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit within perhaps 1 to 5 years, which utterly dwarfs anything that we've experienced in since the Industrial Revolution began. And we still don't really understand, and that's why this research is so important, because now we understand that there was something cosmic that happened. It's left its imprint in the landscape over, what, 4 continents, 5 continents now?
Yeah, over 50 million square kilometers of the Earth's surface, just a giant debris field of there's stuff that is only produced by massive impacts. These things come in at 70,000 miles an hour. And, if they have any diameter at all, if they're 100 meters or more in diameter, they are going to hit the Earth really hard.
Yo, what up, Toad?
And when they do, they pack a huge
man.
amount of kinetic energy, a huge amount of heat and shock, and that creates very
E-bikes,
definite
wow, that's wild.
chemical products. So nanodiamonds, so carbon spherules, so melt glass, that's like the trinitite that was produced in nuclear explosions. All of these, when they're all found together in the same
I would
layer
get like a
of soil,
skateboard.
and when you can put a date on that layer of
Skateboard,
soil,
you can bring it
and
in
when it's all over the
places.
world, there's only one thing can explain that. A
An
massive
e-skateboard.
I don't understand why this is controversial. I really don't. I mean, I do. I understand it, because I know that once people start
With
teaching
big
things,
fat
start
wheels.
doing lectures and giving speeches, they want to stick to their guns, and they want to somehow or another avoid anything that's going to contradict what they've been espousing.
It's
for
a
so
game.
long.
This is a game changer. This information, it changes everything. It changes the way we've looked at our past. It changes the
It's
whole
like
story
a
of
good
archaeology, and it
electric
changes the way we're
skateboard is
going to
probably
look
like
at the future.
$400
I
or
think
something.
that people in academia
You might be able to get
are
one for
reluctant
300 maybe.
to embrace that change, and they're afraid of
But I'd
being
probably
called
$400,
pseudoscientists, because there's a whole
$500.
lobby of skeptics who use this
I don't
word
have one.
pseudoscientist or pseudo-archaeologist
I wish I had
as an
one.
instant dismissal of other
God.
ideas. And those who are
Can you
in the
imagine an
profession,
electric
they
skateboard
don't
in
want to
Miami?
get tarred with that brush. They want to keep themselves clean and pure.
I understand that,
Like-
but you're talking about hard evidence. You're
I think I would
talking about this
I would
nuclear
ride
blast,
forever.
You're talking about nanodiamonds. You're talking about
I would literally
core
ride
samples that
forever.
show this massive shift
Until I run
in
out of
the ice
battery.
core samples, massive shift in temperature. And you're talking about very clear evidence of impacts that.
Oh, I
we
thought he
know
was,
exist. It's
dudes.
not
I
like
thought
a
he was
comet's
stuff, man.
theory. It's not like it's Bigfoot or something.
Was this
like,
like
you know,
25?
we're looking for the final piece of evidence that shows
24.
that comet is a real thing.
Exactly.
It's real.
It's totally real, but it's so difficult
Damn it,
for those
guys.
who are invested in other models to accept.
It's painful.
And unfortunately, they have the ear of
It's
the
too
media.
painful, man.
There are. By the way, all the scientists in the Comet Research Group are
much are
absolutely
they, man?
mainstream scientists, and they have taken a lot of flack from their colleagues for even daring
How
to
much is
investigate this
the
area.
bike?
That's why they've had no funding. They've had to fund themselves
It's
all
so
the way
crazy.
along.
Dude, I
It's
ride
so
a
crazy,
BMX,
because
and
this is
that's
not a
really
controversial
small.
thing in my mind.
Shouldn't be.
I can't
Should not be.
imagine
This is not an airy
riding
fairy
a
thing. We're not talking
fucking
about psychics.
fold-up
We're
bike
not talking about UFOs.
and then
We're
bringing
talking
it
about something we
into
know
fucking
exists. So to bury your
grocery
head in the
store.
sand for something like this seems to me
Vested
so
interest.
preposterous.
Vested interest. Right now, NASA is spending the equivalent of one attack helicopter a year on investigating the comet and asteroid danger. $50 million a year. That's not that much. It's peanuts. It's tiny. It's a minuscule sum. But hundreds of billions of dollars on massive, sophisticated military equipment, which we can use to slaughter one another in ever more sophisticated ways. But just $50 million a year on saving the Earth from a potential cataclysm that could put our civilization back into the Stone Age tomorrow.
And I don't mean to keep harping on Michael Shermer because I like Michael, but that he highlights this sort of natural inclination to poke fun at something that he has done no research on whatsoever. When I pointed out Göbekli Tepe and I sent him some articles from National Geographic, he went radio silent. I mean,
He should know about it.
should.
It's astonishing.
Dude,
the
the
number of
artwork
people
in
mocking
the
it.
Aztec
If
is
you're gonna
amazing.
mock it, you should actually know what you're mocking.
And to say that Göbekli Tepe was created by hunter-gatherers, well, I'm sorry, that's just a theory. That's not a fact. I mean,
Goose should make a video on the
sophisticated
architecture of Aztec
astronomical alignments with
and the
hundreds and hundreds
Mayan
of megalithic
meanings.
pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, the world's first perfectly aligned north-south
They really
building,
study their
which you
Mexican
can only
architecture
do
for
with
sure.
astronomy.
Let me show you. Like, it's insane.
It's not enough to say, oh, they were just hunter-gatherers. There
They
was
moved
something
the stones
extraordinary.
from a half a mile away.
Right.
I mean,
Like, it's
there's some
insane.
serious
Look
sophistication.
at this.
How big
Like,
are
it's
these
so
stones?
good.
Well, the biggest
it's
one
so
actually
good.
is still in the quarry. They left it because it had
Okay,
a
that
fault
one's not
in
that
it.
good.
They
I mean,
clearly
it
intended
is.
to move it
But, like,
50
look at this
tons.
one.
You're looking at 20-foot high objects, and then it's the putting together of them. See, here's the problem. Hunter-gatherer societies are not the kinds of societies that produce large-scale fixed monuments. Why? Because they don't generate a surplus. You can't pay for somebody to become an architect and for of those times, somebody to become an astronomer. You're busy hunting and gathering, and that's
It's
what
like
you
the
do.
start of
Agriculture generates a surplus, and that is the
Exorcist.
problem at Göbekli Tepe, because there is no
statue.
background. This site just appears
The
out
dogs
of nowhere
barking.
amidst what appears to be a hunter-gatherer community, but what
Oh.
they're not considering is the possibility we're looking at a technology transfer, that the survivors of a lost civilization who already had all that knowledge
Oh, yes.
came to Göbekli Tepe and used that
What
site as a
is
center
that?
of initiation to teach the local hunter-gatherers
What
how to
is
do
this?
agriculture. And that's now taken as the beginnings of civilization. I would say it is the reinvention or the remaking
Dude.
of civilization.
So when we're looking
insane.
back at Sumer and any artifacts we find in ancient
It is.
Mesopotamia in that area, Iraq, those are the people that are sort of reinventing and relearning.
Well, that's
Hence
the thing.
all the-
Actually, when we talk of Mesopotamia, which means between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, Göbekli Tepe is sitting right there in the headwaters between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And we cannot separate that from the
Wow,
later
look at
cultures
that.
that enter history 5,000,
What?
6,000 years ago. They're part of
Dude,
the lineage that
what?
descended from Göbekli Tepe
Like,
times.
what?
And what's fascinating about Göbekli Tepe is the
It's
way it
insane,
doesn't
man.
fit,
Whoa,
the way there's
yo.
no background to it. That you would expect to see them practicing.
Where's
learning
Ryan the
architectural
Goose?
skills. The oldest stuff should be the worst.
It looks like
And as they
Lake
carry on and
Demons,
get better, that site ran for
friggin'
1,000 years. The best stuff is the oldest. 1,000 years later, what they were producing wasn't so good. This is a real anomaly. and It needs
Avatar?
to be investigated, not mocked
Insane,
by
dude.
skeptics,
I'm
but
tripping
actually
out.
explored
I'm
to consider
totally tripping out
maybe
right
this
now.
does rock the whole paradigm.
And it's kind of ironic that
You
in
could
their
totally
desire to
do-
get away from the ancient
look at
myths
this.
and tales in the
I'm telling you, this
Bible,
level's insane,
they've
man.
ignored those ancient myths and tales,
It's
which
just so
all
sick,
talk
man.
about
Big
cataclysms.
ugly head.
Well, part of our modern psychology is to imagine that we are somehow so far advanced from our predecessors.
Looks like he's
that we
smoking a
now
dub.
represent the pinnacle of civilization, and anything that preceded us has to be looked upon almost as, as if the workings of children. It requires a major psychological shift to admit or accept that our ancestors may have been far, far more sophisticated than we had imagined in our 19th century models, which basically still dominate thinking today. And, in Graham's book, he devotes several chapters to the story of one 20th century heretic, J. Harlan Bretz. And his story, to me, kind of encapsulates the whole process of forcing his paradigm shift. And for years, he was out there exploring this evidence that there had been this tremendous flooding in Washington State. And all of his critics were dismissive without ever even going out and looking at the evidence firsthand in the field.
Dude, I know what you. I totally know what you're saying, man. I know what you mean, Dick. I know, or Toad. I know exactly what you mean. Not an offense to anything else. Not like an offensive way. But man, I know what you mean.
And begin to explore the landscape for themselves. And one of the
just even the guards, even just the uniqueness of the guards. These guards are very unique in terms of their accuracy and their health.
This whole flood heresy to rest once and for all.
They're a very licensed to kill type of guard.
He spent about 8 days in the field,
right?
Where he's seen
one headshot
his evidence for himself over and over again. And when you look at just one piece of it, you might be able to say, okay, there's all other explanations for that. But what happens is when you get multiple lines of evidence all converging, and there's no way to individually explain away each one of those things other than just saying, oh, well, it's all coincidence.
It's amazing that it's technically a bonus level.
So that
I guess you could say that.
A week out there, they were at a place called Palouse Falls.
But I don't think it is.
In southern Washington, which was one of these areas where these tremendous inland tsunamis
Caverns is also up there.
And I actually just visited there about 8 weeks ago. Where I took a group of people.
Control.
And
probably Control.
Control
is probably
right on the spot.
Might be better.
When he finally had his epiphany.
Do you have any images of that you brought with us?
I have images. I can dig them up here. Yeah.
Control was like based off the movie, which was awesome. But this was all. I guess this is also based off Moonraker, but.
And we can get into a little bit of that.
Like the megalithic architecture is all unique.
Parallel lines of evidence are now converging. But the interesting thing about Galuli was that in the descriptions of the trip, he wandered off by himself for a long time, away from the group, and was standing there looking at this massive cataract with 400-foot cliffs and this little tiny ribbon of water flowing over it and this huge canyon below it.
I agree, man.
Boulders, and
you said it so eloquently. Now that is a quote.
And it finally got to the point where it was undeniable, and he walked back to the group, and the words out of his mouth verbatim were, "How could I have been so wrong?"
I'm not going to add the first controversial part.
And that was like a turning point. And now, and again, Graham describes this very effectively in the book, how in a way the flooding phenomena was hijacked and then placed within
it will be implicit in
context.
The second thing you said.
To avoid the fact that it was something so anomalous and such a departure from our modern experience that
to avoid
we had
controversy.
To look outside of our modern experience to find an explanation. What they wanted to do was find something within our modern experience, and this is the cornerstone of the uniformitarian approach, is that we look for a modern example and then we extrapolate backwards from that. And,
like it did all, really?
They saw, well,
kind of does.
In the modern world, we
have tanks for missing.
Lakes
in the game, yeah.
Form in front of glaciers, and sometimes these
I hear what you're saying.
Lakes might be held
100%.
in by an ice
I agree.
or another glacier. These ice dams will give away,
I agree.
and they will cause pretty catastrophic flooding. They're very common up in Iceland because you've got several volcanoes under the Icelandic ice sheets, and up there they use the term Jökulhlaups to describe these outburst floods. But here's the thing. When you look at the modern versions of it, you basically are looking at floods that are less than 1,000th of one single flow from these floods we're talking about that happened, 12 and 13,000 years ago.
1,000.
Less than 1,000. Less than 1,000th in peak discharge and in total volume. And so it has been admitted in several places. I've extracted the quote saying, well, we do admit that this is a major extrapolation upwards, but never mind. Yeah.
Never mind. It's so disturbing.
See, Harlan Bretz, for 30 years, was walking the walk in the Channel Scablands, and what he saw was evidence for
this force sucks. I gotta do the left strafe again. My left strafe runs are pretty good. They're really fast.
And he went through decades of being put aside by his colleagues, insulted. They mocked him, they laughed at him, just as the skeptics do today. But gradually the evidence began to mount, and they couldn't deny it anymore, that there had been there had been flooding, and actually eventually they gave J. Harlan Bretz the Penrose Medal, which is the ultimate, the ultimate bestowal of
that's
geology
terrible.
in
That was
America.
so bad.
He got the accolade. And he said at that, he was more than 90 years old at that time. And he said at that time, he said, all my enemies are dead, so I have no one left to gloat over.
Hack area, yeah.
But the point is, in a way, there was nothing to gloat about, because what
They
they
did
did
get
was
lazy. You're right.
they separated him from his
100%.
central idea. Instead of accepting that there had been one
They
huge
did.
flood, and that was always his view, they said, oh, there must have been 70 or 80 floods that caused all this damage, and that's what
Maybe they couldn't do
we are
liquid.
seriously challenging right now.
It's so ironic.
The technology of liquid
that
was a big
human
thing,
desire
was a
for
big deal.
knowledge Is what has led us to where we are today. We have this insatiable desire
Flowing
for
liquid.
knowledge and for innovation, but that same human desire to achieve
In
is
graphics.
also what.
I guess they achieved it in friggin' Mario Kart, that waterfall.
And the ego blocks anything that's contrary to what you've already established as
Or
fact.
Mario
As soon
64.
as you see something that might throw a monkey
Maybe not.
wrench into the gears of what you've been teaching and practicing your
Zelda
whole life,
waterfall.
and I know that you've gone through this with Egypt, your whole issue with the Sphinx and with Dr. Shock and John Anthony West, who was on the podcast last
John was
month.
with you just recently.
Yeah, he's amazing.
By the way, I'm going to be doing an event in New York with John Anthony West.
When?
On the 29th of November.
Where?
It's linked on my website.
Okay.
The details are on the talks and events page. It's in some church somewhere, but I'm going to give a presentation, and then I'm going to interview John live
Whoa,
on
what?
stage. First time I've ever done that.
Hi.
I'm kind of podcasting in a way.
He's such a character.
He's an amazing.
I love that dude. And Magical Egypt is, I think, one of the most important things anybody could ever watch.
Yeah.
I think that DVD series is just insane. It's so spectacular and so fantastic. And next to going to Egypt, which I haven't done, I think that's probably the second best thing. Just
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
And John is an example of why we need heretics. This
Yes.
is the thing. You see that science today. Yes, you're right. We have this thirst for knowledge and it's human characteristic, but also we get invested in particular positions. And when people criticize those positions, we take it as an existential threat, and where we get all angry and hot and bothered about it. If we allow that to happen too much, if we don't keep a place for heretics in our society, then we're never going to do anything novel. We're gradually going to get locked down, ossified into the existing system. We need heretics. John has been the leading heretic on ancient Egypt for decades, pointing out that we should listen to what the ancient Egyptians said, that their civilization was
You're
not a
right,
development.
Dick.
It was a
You're-
legacy. It was a legacy.
You kill
from
me
the
softly with
gods,
that
and casts it back again.
description of control.
Now,
That's
when Göbekli
100%
Tepe was
perfect
discovered, it vindicated you in so many
interpretation.
ways, but what
Because
are the
Boris running
possibilities, if any,
away
of more of
just
these
doesn't make any
sites being
sense.
explored and exposed? I mean,
Huge.
are there more that people are looking at right now? Are there any that are under the radar?
Just a year ago, at the bottom of the Sicily Channel, at a depth of more than 120
It's just a
feet,
room. There was like nothing in
underwater
it, just some
for at
tables and
least
computer, and
9,000
it was
years,
big.
is a huge megalithic
You're right.
site. Before the
But it was
discovery
cool,
of Göbekli
man.
Tepe, that site could never have been explained. The dating is
School
absolutely
level.
definite. The seas rose and covered it at least 9,000 years ago. We don't know how long
I
it
agree.
stood there before it was covered by the rising seas. But there it sits
no
underwater, and I
Aztec.
think underwater discoveries, and I've had a part to play in this over the years, are one of the ways forward. We need to look at those areas because there was a 400-foot rise in sea level at the end of the Ice Age. You're looking at the amount of land that would be put together in, say, Europe and China added together. That amount of land was swallowed by those rising seas. And archaeology has largely proceeded without taking account of those lost lands. I'm not saying they haven't looked at all, but they're primarily in marine archaeology interested in shipwrecks.
Now, this megalithic site, is there images of this that we could look at?
There
You have
are,
anything here right now?
I can probably find it.
just-
Monolith at the bottom of the Sicily Channel. Try that. Search on
What?
it.
Why? Why?
Yeah.
But so what does this look like? Is this been clearly established that this actually is the work of man? This is not some sort of a yardang or something?
Of course, there's dispute.
Right, of course.
The mainstream is not going to just accept this overnight, but again, it's mainstream scientists who found it. They're absolutely certain that they're dealing with a man-made site. There are holes drilled through these megaliths. One of them is very, very large. There's a series of other megaliths round about. It's not a natural thing.
So here we're looking at some of it right now.
So there's that big megalith broken into two parts right there.
Oh, wow.
And this we can say, often with archaeological sites, the problem is dating them. You know, for example, there are incredible megalithic temples all over the island of Malta, not far away from this place. Incredible megalithic temples. But they can't date the stone directly. They have to date organic material associated with the stone, and that can give them misleadingly young dates. In a case of a site that's been covered by sea level rise, there can be no argument. Nobody went down there and built that 9,000 years ago.
Right.
It had to be built before the seas rose, and that puts a minimum age on it of 9,000 years.
What are the best images that we can look at? Because right now I'm just seeing rocks. It's very difficult because I'm looking at something very two-dimensional.
And I'm afraid that's all you're going to see. Those are the best images of it that exist.
But the diver one right above that.
That's in Yonaguni. That's
that's
not in the Sicily Channel.
So what are the biggest pieces down there? Is it this right here? Is this what you're?
Yeah, that big thing there. It's 30 feet long, I think.
And is it what leads you to believe that this is man-made?
Damn it.
The scientists who worked on it, the fact that there are holes drilled through the stone, the fact that you can go to neighboring areas like Armenia and find really very ancient megalithic sites where they have exactly the same kind of
Like, there's
holes
got to
drilled through the
be
stones, and the holes seem to have
a
been
10-bullet
used for
strat
astronomical
that could be a
sighting. Now, this
faster
site's a
start.
mess, it's been knocked over by the sea, it's fallen
It's a
down,
wild
but
idea,
we're seeing the same thing,
but
big
I like
megaliths
it.
with holes drilled through them.
And you're also dealing
I
with
honestly like it.
9,000 plus years of erosion and barnacle growth and
all of that. And the ocean is a difficult place to work, you know. It's not easy. Visibility can be bad. You're dealing with currents. There's all kinds of problems. So this is an important discovery.
James Cameron and his crazy little submarine.
Bring in James Cameron. Yeah. Well, I spent 7 years scuba diving all around the world looking at this stuff, and you know, it's pretty convincing.
Well, it does make sense that if we do know for a fact, and we do, that the sea level rose dramatically at the end of the Ice Age, it makes sense that some things would be buried
Please, like,
underwater.
please.
Well,
Like,
and during
please.
the Ice Age,
Like, I'm begging
whatever,
you.
you don't have to talk about
I'm begging you.
civilizations or anything, but during the Ice Age, living on the coastlines and establishing your villages, communities, and everything on the coastlines would have been probably one of the most benign places to get, because for one thing, you're down near sea, the sea level, the presence of the seas is going to, smooth out the climate and so forth. So, you're going to have probably most cultural development during the Ice Age is going to be close to the sea. So it's going to be underwater now, just like Graham was talking about. And so this, to me, is probably the future of archaeology, is marine archaeology, where a lot of discoveries are going to be made. And that particular thing, I mean, there's a lot of megalithic structures around the world that if you set that thing up like this and put some sighting holes through it, would look precisely like, scrape the barnacles off of it, and no one's saying, oh, it's proven. But what it is we have to keep an open mind and say, well, there are some very strong similarities here, so let's investigate this thing further. And that's the whole point of all this, is all of this stuff needs more research. It doesn't need some
I will play other
dismissal
levels
from
eventually,
somebody
I swear.
who's,
I promise.
protecting
I swear.
their own paradigm. It needs
That's my
more
plan, I
research
want you.
on all fronts. I mean, because I think that there's enough evidence that is now accumulated to suggest that there is a deep history to the human species on Earth. And we're just beginning to really appreciate how much deeper it
I was thinking
really
going
is
for
than
Archive
conventional
16 with the
archaeology.
2.x.
And rather than just waving an arm
I was
and
thinking about doing that.
dismissing this,
With a skeptical sneer.
with a skeptical
That would be
sneer,
an insane
exactly.
What's
heist if I
interesting
can
is
pull that
there's
off.
accepted
be
scientific
insane.
models of humanity when you're talking about supervolcanoes, right? Like the supervolcano of 60, 70,000 years ago.
Yeah, that would be a
I mean,
heist.
they pretty much accept that wiped out of the vast majority of human beings on Earth. And why is the supervolcano hypothesis so easily accepted, but yet the asteroidal impact? I mean, both
I guess
of them are
runway
real
I gotta go
events,
back
both
to.
of them are historically documented. In fact, we've never watched a supervolcano take over the world, but we've seen asteroids hit other planets. We've
Egypt.
actually
Eric, the
watched
director, has
Jupiter
requested
leave.
me to play Egypt years ago. I said I would, and I never did, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
I apologize.
Boom.
Yeah.
But I
and
mean-
actually more than 20 impacts. Each
I don't know,
one
man.
of them would have wiped out all life on Earth if that object had hit.
I'm already
so it's a
squinting enough
very-
trying to shoot
another
this
thing
box
we're talking
guard.
about underwater
I
structures,
can't
but
be
let's also
squinting trying
consider the
to
possibility
see a
of
dancing baron.
is important here. Let's also consider the
And this
possibility that we have
animation
misidentified
based on
a
RNG.
number of
It's just too
structures that are
much.
standing in plain
It's
view,
too much for me.
like the Great Sphinx. Egyptology.
Oh, that's just too much RNG. I know this is really RNG based too, but man, Egypt is just heartbreaking.
Pharaoh Khafre of the 4th dynasty, around about 2500 BC. That is not a fact. That is an opinion. But it's presented as a fact.
But I mean, for me, just getting into it, it would be fun because I don't like. I could still get a good time with whatever RNG.
In fact, there's nothing at all.
I'm not saying I would get a good time. What I'm saying
close
is,
to a pyramid, which they assume
doesn't need to be that good RNG.
built, again on the absence of evidence that
Just
the
can't be
Sphinx
terrible
must be built.
RNG.
But John Anthony West was the first to see that actually when we look
Maybe
at the
someone like
Sphinx, we're
Agent.
looking at a highly eroded stone object. And that erosion is very odd, and that's why he brought Professor Robert Schoch, Professor of Geology from Boston University, to Giza in 1992 to look at the Sphinx and say what actually caused this weathering on the Sphinx. And Schoch immediately saw it. What caused it was exposure to a very long period of heavy rainfall. And no such rains have fallen in Egypt in the last 5,000 years, but they did fall during the Younger Dryas. We had a prolonged rainout from this comet impact as that ice cap was pulverized and a massive amount of ice water was thrown up into the upper atmosphere. A prolonged rainout, which could have been the cause of the erosion on the Sphinx.
Now, what has occurred new? What discoveries have been discovered in the last year? Like what is new that we can look at?
In terms of archaeology,
Oh my
there's
gosh.
not much new. Göbekli Tepe at the moment is in deep freeze. It's right 30 miles from the Syrian border. There's been massive unrest in Şanlıurfa, which is the main town. Archaeology is very difficult for them to carry on there. It's basically just frozen.
So they just sort of stopped.
They've just kind of stopped, you know. And in fact, there's an amazing number of these sites. Another site I visited for Magicians of the Gods was Baalbek in the Lebanon. Absolutely stunning site. And again, I'm convinced that that site is nuanced. It is, yes, there is a Roman temple there, but they put that temple there because the site was sacred long before. And there's this incredible U-shaped megalithic wall which surrounds Baalbek, which does not appear to have any connection to the Roman structure at all. Again, that's an area which is subject to tremendous unrest and difficulty, and it's difficult for archaeologists to proceed. But just in 2014, they made a huge
Yeah, man.
of a buried block which weighs 1,460 tons, which was sitting there on the site. They've been working that site for 100 years. They only found it in 2014.
Shit, dude, you're like moving in a fucking a few days, eh, man?
Is that what that is?
Are you serious? You're moving in like a few days? That's wild, bro. Congrats, man.
2,000 pounds.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
To a ton, to an imperial.
Forgot about that.
So whatever, add 3 zeros on it, double it and add 3 zeros.
Oh yeah, dude.
It's a horrendous
Congrats.
amount of pounds. Put it that way. It's the single largest block of stone ever cut and quarried in.
And they found this just in 2014.
They found it in 2014. Now there's another big one right beside it, which has been in plain view for about the last 100 years. And it's astonishing to me that this one, which is just below it, was covered by sediment. That
You
they
have an
didn't
actual
discover it.
calculator? You might be the only person left.
I never go anywhere without my
You
calculator.
have a real
Joe.
calculator.
Uh-huh.
Nobody has one of those. We were just talking about that yesterday. They're like, who the fuck
It's
buys
not an
calculators?
iPhone, it's an actual
I'm
calculator.
the last guy on Earth to carry one of
Wow. So Baalbek was also the site of, I mean, there's many monoliths that have been discovered there, and it's a really fascinating site that many people have sort of overlooked when you talk about ancient structures from the past.
Absolutely. I have to resist. I've got nothing against aliens, but I don't need aliens to explain these things. I think a much leaner and more elegant explanation for these huge archaeological anomalies is a lost human civilization.
Much better.
And that's been the case that I've been making for 25 years. I think the
please,
alien thing is a bit
please.
distraction. Of course there's aliens. Of course the
Why?
universe is full of life.
Guys,
But
he's
ancient
never stuck.
archaeological sites
How
are
long
not
has it
good
been?
evidence for that idea. They're
He's
very-
just never
unless you
stuck,
massage the
man.
evidence a lot, they're not good evidence. So I think we are dealing with a lost human civilization, and at Baalbek,
It's
20
way
feet
too
above the ground,
painful,
we
man.
have 3 blocks of stone
It's too much.
joined so closely together that you can't get an edge of a sheet of paper between them. Each one weighs more than 900 tons, and they are 20 feet above the ground. It's a stunning.
Like, it's just not.
It's just
That's why
absolutely
it's just not worth it.
And how does
too
mainstream
much.
archaeology deal with that?
They say, oh, the Romans built it all.
Oh, the Romans.
Yeah, the Romans.
It's really painful.
The Romans did do some awesome stuff.
They did do some awesome stuff. They absolutely did. But this site is separate from the Roman site. It surrounds it, but it's not part of it.
In terms of your question, what's happened within the last
Like,
year,
it's brutal.
I would
He
think
hasn't
that
gotten
probably
stunk
the most
once
significant thing,
yet.
or certainly right up there would be the,
And we've had some pretty fucking
and the
consistent
discovery,
runs.
like
Not
this
consistent,
article I
but
have
like
right here, which came out in 2004, so it's not that
in
old.
an hour, not
The
one,
nano
not
diamond
even one an
rich
hour.
layer across 3
Oh
continents,
my god.
consistent with major cosmic impact at 12,800 years ago, and it's something like 24, 25.
That's why.
highly
I know I have a PB with
And these
4
are the
stuck. I
common
know I
research
do.
group. These are the
But
scientists from the Comet Research Group who
it's
have
just
funded all their research
procrastination.
themselves. They came out with another paper in
The 4 stuck is
2000.
literally procrastination.
That's in the Journal of Geology.
Yeah.
But then there's the proceedings.
I've
of the
already
National
wasted too
Academy
much
of
time
Sciences,
procrastinating.
host a lot of their work as well, and the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences get into trouble for
Right.
hosting their work, but they feel it's important, so they keep on hosting it.
This
We
is
gotta
spectacularly
stop
confusing
wasting
to me,
time.
because that's rock solid science.
Yeah.
I mean, this is evidence. This is actually, you can weigh this stuff. You
Because I
can
don't want,
measure
like,
it, you could
I
run
want
tests on
better
it,
than
you can find out what
140.
its
I do.
components
I
are.
want better than
This to me
140.
is so
I do.
baffling.
Yeah, it's very baffling. They brought out another paper in
That's my goal.
2015. I won't go into some of the details are boring, but it's called a Bayesian chronological analysis. And basically, what they were looking at they asked themselves, is it possible that this evidence, these nanodiamonds, these melt glass, the carbon spherules, could that have been laid down gradually? And the chronological analysis that they've done absolutely answers that. No, it was not laid down gradually. This whole
I really gotta really try the 10 bullet strat. Because if we're leaving a guard alive anyways,
Yeah, and what had happened, Joe,
Right.
was that for years,
we
archaeologists
could
had
literally
recognized
save a
this,
second.
black mat layer at about 24 or more of the Clovis sites around North
It's super
America, which there had
inconsistent.
been over 50 of them that have been studied. And it was C. Vance Haynes who wrote an interesting paper saying that he was the one who noted that below this black mat layer, which is only 2 to 3 inches thick in most sites, you found evidence of the Clovis culture. You found their tool kits and their spear points and so on. You found evidence of the extinct megafauna, but not above. You would find this evidence of this cultural activity and the megafauna right up to the bottom of the black mat layer, but not above it.
Why?
So
Like,
what
why?
finally happened was in 2007,
Why?
Richard Firestone and Alan West and
Such
some of their colleagues,
stupid
it was just
animation.
basically a small group at that point, took a look at this closer look, and that's when they began to discover these impact proxies, usually right at the base of the layer. And the layer itself is carbonaceous, which suggests that there had been a lot of soot deposited, which would imply widespread wildfires. In fact, there's a study right off the coast of California here on the Santa Rosa Islands that pretty much concluded that there was just massive wildfires that pretty much just annihilated everything. And then this was preceded by the deposition of this black mat layer. And right at the bottom of this black mat layer is where you find the nanodiamonds, the magnetic grains, the microspherules, the carbonaceous spherules, fullerenes. You find these impact proxies, and they're not all the
Please.
same at all the sites.
Please.
In fact,
Please.
that's one of the things that the critics have
Oh,
said.
dude.
But
Do you know how
what they're
fast that
doing is I
was,
think
that
they
round
have an
was?
oversimplified model.
Guys,
When you
that
look
was
at
like
a common
21.
fragmentation event,
Not even
you could be
joking.
looking at the individual pieces have very different
Oh.
compositions. And what we were talking about earlier, the torrid meteor stream, I'm not convinced at this point that it was necessarily just a single impact event. It may have been a bombardment episode that may have lasted even several decades. It may have been
It's too
ceased for a
painful.
while. And we were
It's too
talking about
much.
this last night over dinner, that there seems to be a second spasm at 11,600 years ago that's also associated with a massive rise in sea level. They call there's 2 meltwater spikes, meltwater spike 1A and meltwater spike 1B. I'm quite convinced that these meltwater spikes that have been documented by marine geologists and oceanographers are correlated with these melting events of the ice sheet that I've been looking at in terms of their geomorphic consequences. Because some of these events, I mean, the only way I can describe some of these meltwater events is that the only modern analog to this would be a tsunami. And we've seen some pretty devastating tsunamis within the last decade or two, both in Indonesia and in Japan. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of the videos of these tsunamis. Anybody listening, it is definitely worthwhile.
Dude, we should fucking get an interview with Dr. David Doak about Aztec 00, the Mayan artwork, and the megalithic structures, and do a fucking video podcast.
In Montana, Idaho, Washington, where
that'd be such a good idea. Discussing the megalith and talking about
over 1,000 feet deep.
Teotihuacan in Mexico.
That's not an oceanic tsunami. That's
right. It's a freshwater tsunami. It's
and all the other Mayan.
This catastrophic
Quetzalcoatl.
And I've traced the sources of some of these meltwater. I've made 2 trips now up into the plateau country.
Because I think there is Quetzalcoatl here, especially the serpent, right?
Because in the conventional model,
it's like dragon-esque.
That goes back to Harlan Brett's.
Serpenty, dragony.
Basically, what they've done is they said initially there could have been no flood because Harlan Brett's didn't provide a source for the water. They said, the critics said, well, you're saying that all of this evidence in the landscape is evidence of the flood, but what was the source of the flood? And he didn't have a source. So the critics then said, well, you don't have a source for the flood water, therefore the flood didn't take place. Then as the research evolved, you had independent evidence accumulating in western Montana by J.T. Pardee, who was with the U.S. Geological Survey. And he was investigating evidence that the mountain valleys of western Montana had been filled up with an enormous volume of water. And this volume of water seemed to be exactly the same time as Brett's floods. He then assumed that this was a giant lake. And because you can see, and we can, I think we have some images. I think Jamie has some images, so we'll pull them up shortly. We're on the mountainside, you see the shorelines etched, 1,000 feet.
Oh no.
And what he then decided
what? They're already jacking it up. I saw there's a button now on the web page. No, they did not. They did not do that, Toad. It's what? It's now like $13 or something. They did not do that.
Now the geological
that's so
is shifting because number one, the evidence is overwhelming and they can't deny it anymore.
Do you know how much
for a gradualist or a more uniformitarian explanation? So they immediately
it's holy shit, man. I'm not judging anyone that does that. Okay, there's a lot of issues.
Well, you're talking
you know what I mean?
Somewhere between 520 and
so Twitch is just getting everything. And, like Bezos is just getting everything from everyone.
Normally, when you have a large lake, you have a huge
this is bypassing the ads for affiliates. It's fine. I understand people, whatever. I'm not saying you have to sub to me. I'm not saying that, but I appreciate it. But I cranked up my ads because yeah, I mean. Yeah, if you do want to sub or whatever, like that really helped me out a lot, but you don't have to. But what I'm saying is, so the turbo button's already on the thing, so no, like I feel like people aren't going to sub to people anymore. You know what I mean? Which is like, it is what it is, but it's completely detrimental to the very thin margin that we're already getting after being taxed, right? Like I'm getting, right, 35% of a sub after tax. Not even me paying the taxes, but pre-taxed from the payout. And yeah, it's on the browser now. There's a button for turbo. Of course people are going to use it, which is fine, but I'm not making a living off of ads, but some people are. But that's insane that they increased to $13.90. That's so expensive. $13.99.
Therefore, it wasn't water, it wasn't subglacial floods.
It's just so terrible.
Harlan Brett's story.
It's just so evil, man.
Well, here's the thing.
It's just so
Shaw
evil.
and his colleagues
It's
really
just so
come up with a
evil.
plausible
I
explanation
just
for how
won't
you could
watch
form
the ads.
these massive subglacial
It's just
reservoirs.
so
In fact,
evil, man.
What they call the Livingstone Lake event required 84,000 cubic kilometers of water. And 84,000 kilometers.
Yo, did you write about increasing the ad
we divide that by
viewership, whatever?
36,
When I was delivering, I
that's
got
about
30 cents a
2,300
day
cubic miles of water.
of ad
That's more than
watch.
all of the Great Lakes
So I
combined.
made about
Vastly bigger than all of the Great
$4.45
Lakes combined. It's probably every
in
lake
ad
in
watch
America combined. And he said this one event
in May,
required over 2,000
or
cubic miles
for like
of
over
water.
1 or 2 weeks.
Well, where did that water come from? So he basically said, well, there must have been a reservoir
So,
somehow
I mean,
that formed. His critics have said, that's
going
impossible.
up.
You couldn't form that much water under the ice sheet.
I really
Well,
cranked up the
what's
ad, so I'm
happened now
sorry
is
everyone.
the
Please get an
idea
ad
of a
blocker.
major cosmic impact into the ice sheet has completely obviated the need for a subglacial reservoir. Because now we have a way of instantaneously melting enormous volumes of ice.
It's no longer a mystery where the water came from. Fully explained. This has been the missing piece of the puzzle until the comet research.
Paying to like, do you know how much money Twitch is getting off these ads? And now Twitch is making like
vast areas of North America that are flat.
it's just so insane. This business model, I can't even think of another one that's like it,
The glaciers
right?
didn't go through.
I just was there.
because they're already making all the money off the ads.
It's gorgeous. Rolling hills and
This
it
is
just
like a
wasn't
trifecta
crushed flat.
screwing the people over, because it screws over the
So we know,
affiliates.
that those
It
glaciers
screws
melted
over
and they created the
the
Great Lakes.
consumer
And the Great Lakes
to an
were
extent.
from glaciers. We know that. That's an established fact. So why
because
is
it's
all this
fucking
confusing? I
$14
just
for
don't
no
understand why they
reason
wouldn't
when they
just
when they
add
get
that
all the
to it.
money
They're just going to accept
from the
that
ads.
glaciers somehow or another in the last 10,000 years, the glaciers just
That's all.
decided
It just
to
screws
stop
over the
smashing
consumer
North
and
America
the
flat and melt and create these great inland oceans
viewer.
of fresh water.
The only two things
Bizarre.
It's
in the
very bizarre.
Twitch
Ultimately,
universe
a lot of
other than Jeff Bezos.
is involved in this. There's this
It's just so
desire not-
evil,
also
man.
In the modern world, there's a desire not to panic the public, not to
Yeah,
say
we
things
need a
that are-
union,
that are going
man.
to cause, that are going to cause panic, you know.
I was thinking
Trump being
of an
president?
app. What if we made an app
I think people are ready for panic.
that just
I-
unites
Is anybody debating
people
you
from different companies together
You know,
to
I
sign
tried to-
petitions or
not
even to make a
specifically on this, I
union,
tried to do a debate
or at
with
least
Sandy Hamas,
mobilize
who's the guy who runs
communication,
these pyramids
kind of
and
like a
that-
telegram,
yeah, total, I mean,
but
very crazy event. But
There's a video of it
specific
online.
for
There's a video
motions
of it,
and
there's a video
unions.
of it online.
The
Yeah.
debate lasts,
Union
what, 30
forming
seconds?
It's
in
something
companies.
like
There
that,
you
yeah,
search what you do.
And
You
then
search
later on when
the name of your
when he
company,
finally
pops up,
agreed to come back into
and
the
it's like a
room, he
Facebook
was so
page,
angry
whatever,
he walked out. When he
in
finally
terms of
came back
structure,
into the room, he was asked
an
a
open
question about
Facebook
Göbekli
page.
Tepe, and just like
It's not
the
on Facebook, but it's in this
skeptic, he
app.
didn't know anything about Göbekli Tepe.
That's
Or he
kind of
claimed not
controlled,
to know about it.
secure a
This-
little
this-
bit,
This is supposed to be
in
the world's
theory.
most famous
Bullshit, but-
Egyptologist, and he knew nothing
And,
about this incredible site in a
We
in
need
a
Yeah,
neighboring
just
country.
discussion about
One point to make,
like, for example,
Trump was talking about the
Uber Eats
census
drivers.
11,600 years ago. We're dealing with an episode of cataclysm which begins 12,800 years ago and ends 11,600 years ago.
or
Both
Twitch
episodes
Twitch
accompanied
streamers.
by
Everyone starts
massive
talking.
floods. And the 11,600
We get
years ago,
Rakaita
I
Law in
mentioned
here.
this last year, it's in Magicians
Shout
of
out
Oz. What's
Rakaita Law.
interesting about that is the exact date.
I think I unfollowed him one day or something, or he hasn't gone online in a while.
Plato, that's the only source we
He's a
have
guy in Minnesota that
comes
does
to us. Many
law
people think it's
streams.
all over the place, but it's not. Atlantis comes to us
He
from
was
the
doing a lot of
Egyptians
the
Plato,
Supreme
lived
Court
around
decision making on the
14
injection
BC.
segregation
and he got the story through his family
in
line.
November,
his
December
ancestor Solon,
2021.
who had visited Egypt in 600 BC. And there Solon was told of a great civilization that had existed on Earth that was the progenitor civilization of Egypt,
Get him to lead it.
but that was destroyed in a terrible cataclysm. And he asked, a cataclysm involving a gigantic flood, and Atlantis was submerged beneath the waves and was never seen again.
We're
And so
just
Solon
getting
said to the
raped,
priests,
man.
when did this happen?
We're
And
just
they
getting
said
destroyed.
9,000 years
We
ago.
need unions,
That was
man.
in 600 BC, so that's 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. That's
And I think an
meltwater
app
pulse
could
How
do
could
it.
they
If an
know?
app
Yeah,
couldn't
how could we have to start taking
create
this
that
stuff more
disparity and
seriously?
enslave
Instead
people,
of sneering
I think
at
an
it and
app can bring us out of
skepticizing
it.
out of existence, we need to leave a little bit of room for
Union
extraordinary
Finder?
ideas possibly being right.
What if we
That's
call
the
it
main
Union
beef I have with
Finder?
the skeptics is that they want to throw the baby out with the
Union
bathwater.
I
Uniter?
want to add something to that. In the
Union
debate,
Finder?
you know, Plato discusses Atlantis.
Union Maker, Union Finder. I think Union Finder's pretty good.
He prefaces the story of Atlantis.
Yeah, and Amazon Prime is
by
taking 2 to
recounting
3
the myth
days
of
sometimes
Phaeton.
now.
Now, the myth of Phaeton is a very
Oh, wow.
interesting story.
That's still pretty incredible, though, man.
Basically, what it is,
Like,
is
that's pretty
Phaeton was
amazing.
the offspring of Helios, the sun
But I know what you
god,
mean.
who was raised, didn't know who his father was.
Oh yeah, because they undercut everything. They
And
underpay
one day
everything.
He was being taunted at school because
They're
all
just-
of his
it's just-
schoolmates had
It's the most greedy thing ever with
recounted
Uber
great
Eats
deeds of
too.
their
Uber Eats has
father and
made
everything. So he went home
like
distraught. Finally, his mother said, "Well,
billions
your
of
father
dollars,
is
and
the big
the
granddaddy of them
workers
all."
can't make a
Helios,
living
the sun
wage.
god.
It's
So
just, it's
Phaeton
crazy.
decides he's going to go and find his father, and eventually does, and he goes to some, celestial realm where his
Prime
father's
back when it
located,
was
and
same day. Oh wow,
the way it is with the
same day. That's
Greek
wild.
gods, they have unlimited powers, except they
Did-
also
did
have
they do the
certain
bait and
restrictions. For
switch?
example, if a god
Now
makes
is the
a
service
promise,
just going to be terrible?
he or she cannot go back.
The decline? Oh
So,
no.
when Helios sees
Are we in a
Phaeton's
post-Amazon
lost son becoming sober-joyed, he
world
says,
now?
"I'm so happy to see
Can you
and I'll
imagine?
grant you any boon you want."
Not yet. Amazon is still
Phaeton
the
says,
king.
"I want to drive the chariot to the sun. I want to drive your chariot." And Helios says, "Well, I meant anything you wanted except that." So it goes back and forth and back and forth. Finally, Phaeton convinces his father, let me do it. His father says, "Look, you've got to hang on to those reins tight because those steeds are
Yeah.
going to pull away from you."
Yeah.
He gets in there, the gates
Yeah.
of the sun open. It describes,
Can you imagine?
in the myth, you can go, you can read Edith Hamilton or Bullfinch or any of the great retellings of the Greek myths, and they'll describe it in there. It goes through the signs of the zodiac, and then all of a sudden it careens off and heads down to Earth. And then it describes...
I applied for an Amazon job today.
Setting the Earth on fire. And finally,
It was
the Jupiter...
some sort of manager role.
The beseeching of Poseidon, who's afraid that the oceans are going to boil away, gets Zeus to mount his Mount Olympus and hurl his thunderbolt, which knocks
Thanks,
Phaeton
man.
from the sky, and he falls to Earth and falls into the river Eridanus, which is a metaphor for the Milky Way. And his sisters, the Heliades, then weep over the death of their brother, and their tears fall to Earth and cause the great flood.
Yeah.
Plato then, after
I'm willing to
referencing
work
that
anywhere,
myth,
anywhere
he
safe.
then says, now this has the form of
I almost took a
but what it
job
really represents
doing
is the
asphalt
declination
repair
or decline
and
of the bodies in space,
spraying
orbiting
of
around
people's
the Earth, and
driveways.
eventual falling to Earth of one of those
That paid
bodies,
$23
and
an
the
hour,
conflagration of all
but it
things
was way too
triggered by
dangerous.
the fall of that body.
They had this friggin' wind blower
Because the Taurid meteor stream
because
is
they
so
blow the
cold,
wind,
because it
all the
appears to
dirt
come
and
at
dust
us
off
from
the
direction
asphalt
of the
before
concentration
spraying
of
first.
zodiacal.
But this wind blower's motor
That's where those
generated,
shooting stars,
so you have on
amongst
the
which are
back
some
there's
very
this
large
motor and
objects
there's this
that appear
gas
in the
tank
past that
that's
can be
like, I don't
discovered in
know,
the future.
5
That's
to
where they
10
come from.
liters
Come
that's
from
just
that
sitting there,
area of the sun.
sitting on your
It's
back with this
actually an
motor and
illusion.
you're
It
fucking
appears
like
that
Iron
they're
Man,
actually
like
coming from Taurus.
It
it's
looks
like,
like that.
and
They
then
come
this
from that
this
area
guy
of the sun.
had this like Jimmy rigged torch, like he like made a torch with butane. Like he had this big ass propane, not butane, propane tank. It's just disaster, man. I turned it down. Learning interlocking.
It was an extremely active shower.
Yeah,
It would
that's
have
smart,
created some
dude.
pretty darn
I'm gonna
impressive light shows.
Screenshot
Even if
this.
it wasn't causing
Screenshot it.
catastrophes down
Yeah.
below. But what they've conjectured is that
Cause
there might be
the
kinds of
asphalt, it was all
multiple
like they had this like
Tunguska-like
tar, this like
impact
tar
bombardment
creator, that this
when,
blowtorch,
there could be,
and you
there could
want
be
they like it was
thousands
just
of
nightmare,
objects within
man.
the
It
Taurus
was such a
meteor stream on the
disaster.
same scale as the Tunguska object. And
It was
that-
the only
if-
place that like
if you
offered
go
me a
and you read
job
the
and
accounts,
also
the
Uber
eyewitness
Eats.
accounts, over and over again, people are saying things like, well, it looked like it was being disgorged from the sun.
Way too fucking
It looked like
dangerous.
it was being born out of the
No,
sun.
thank you.
Right? It looked like a
Never.
second sun in the sky. Like for a short period of time, the sun had a twin, right?
I take care of
summertime
myself.
Taurids are coming from their
Always.
perihelion passage around the sun. So you, like Graham was saying, they make an elliptical orbit out
Fuck
to
that
Jupiter
shit.
and back around the sun in this stream, right? Earth crosses that
Interlocking,
stream twice
interesting.
each year. One time, late June, early July, we cross, but at that point, they're coming from the direction of the sun. So
Yeah, and then
their-
there's
their
like I
arrival
saw
to Earth
roofer
is gonna be very
jobs,
difficult to see because they're coming
which is
from the direction
one of the
of
most
sun,
dangerous
right? But
jobs.
that's exactly where, on June 30th, a Taurid
Nightmare.
meteor would be coming from.
I did some roofing work before.
The perfect date for the peak
Pretty fucking
of the
dangerous.
shower and the correct place in the sky, to me, is pretty convincing evidence. that it
Some
was
eaves
most
trough,
likely
roof
the remnant
walking.
of that torrid stream. The other time that the Earth crosses is late October, early November. In fact, we just passed out of it within the last week, basically. But it peaks, interestingly,
Eaves trough cleaning.
coincidentally, between like October 30th and November.
Not walking
4th
on the
and
eaves
5th.
trough,
So
walking
it's
on the
peaking
roof.
right around Halloween time. In fact, they've been called the
People's
Halloween
houses.
meteors, and there's some very
Halloween
interesting
fireworks sometimes they call
With
them.
the Halloween
ladders.
fireworks, yeah. But there's some very interesting work done by a researcher back around the early 20th
I've done
century
some crazy
named
jobs.
Grant spent about 15 years researching the connections between ancient
No, you've done
calendars.
some crazy jobs.
And
Let
he
me
concluded
log
one
in.
thing very interesting was that a lot of these ancient calendars were being synchronized by people's observations of the rise and fall of the
Jake, like they can
Pleiades,
make
which is the
a,
shoulder of the
a
boat.
superhero
Pleiades
cartoon out of
comprises,
your work
basically
experience,
part
out of
of
your
that,
resume.
Constellation of the boat.
It'd be like fucking
Yeah,
Toxic
shoulder of the
Crusaders.
boat. And what he came up with was that in his research, he discovered that
And then the
many of
fucking
these
molten
stories that
metal
were
shit.
associated with this, like the slaying of the celestial bull, you know, Gilgamesh and
The
Enkidu,
smelter,
in the
whatever the fuck it
earliest
was.
known story, they fight this celestial bull. There's many counterparts and variants of that in mythical stories. And so what he then found out, though, was that in many cases, that our modern Halloween actually goes back thousands of years to an ancient Day of the Dead that was observed all over the earth at the same time every year, even in the southern hemisphere. And it usually revolved around a commemoration of the culmination of the Pleiades, which is when the Pleiades crosses the local meridian. In other words, it reaches the keystone of the royal arch, so to speak, up in the sky. So if you go out on Halloween now and you face the south in the northern hemisphere, you will see the Pleiades right at midnight. At midnight, they will be, if you think of the arch of the zodiac as being like a clock, it's right there at midnight, right? Well, here's the interesting link, is that in all of these myths, what Halliburton discovered over and over again was that the Day of the Dead ultimately went back to myths of the destruction of the world by a great flood and or fire.
It's fascinating that it's all coming out of the constellation Taurus too, and it's the celestial bull that they're fighting in these ancient myths, and that all these cultures around the world are celebrating the Day of the Dead at this exact same time. This is amazing stuff.
And right now our science is closing its eyes to this. I think it's fair to say, with the Taurid meteor stream, which is a very big issue in this whole discussion, that we are dealing with a hidden hand in human history. It's something that is going to
Fuck you.
ultimately require us to re-explain almost everything. The skeptics hate it. They can't bear it. Because, first of all, it involves cataclysms. And secondly, it involves the possibility of losing a whole civilization from the record. It's really interesting when you look at the dates of this cluster, this episode of bombardment between 12,800
What?
and
What?
12,600 years ago. That's the period that just immediately precedes what mainstream academia think of as the very beginnings of civilization. And they've just never, maybe it's not even their fault. This is so recent, this science is so new, that they've not had time to adapt to it. But if they adapt to it and take this into account, then suddenly what was an extraordinary and absurd and impossible idea, that there was a lost civilization 12,000 years ago, becomes a very plausible and reasonable idea. And then we start, once we take that on board, then we can start opening our eyes to archaeological anomalies, like the Great Sphinx, like Baalbek, like submerged ruins, like Göbekli Tepe, and begin to consider, what does all this mean? Are we in fact a species with amnesia? Are we here forgetful of the truth about ourselves? Maybe that's why we're so fucked up, because we just actually don't know. We've made up a
why?
story about where we came from and what we have.
Come
I
on,
certainly think it
man.
plays a part, and I also think that conservative skepticism is probably prudent when you're dealing with most scientific
Guys,
issues. Most things that come
an
up,
hour and a
people are
half,
coming in. I mean, there's so many
and no
charlatans out there,
stucks.
crazy
None.
people that
Not
are
one.
claiming
Not a
new
single
discoveries.
stuck. Not one.
in some cases, they examine these discoveries as long as they're far enough away from us or weird enough.
I just remember Dynamics' words on his Aztec 00141. Well, that was an arduous journey.
At least 4 times, maybe larger than the United States, or then, excuse me, the world.
They've got an orbit of about 10,000 years. Yeah, and that's interesting with comets.
Where's Dynamics, the DJ? I know. I'm not trying. If he's lurking, no worries, he can lurk. But I mean, appreciate he follows me. But what I'm saying is, those words go through my mind a lot. It's yeah, like I would say on this side of the pond, it's just painful, man.
Does this have anything to do with Earth 1 and Earth 2? Does it have anything to do with the initial impact that created the moon?
That's so fucking James Bond British.
Formation of the Earth. And this is all
well, that was an arduous journey.
Astroscientists, or astrophysicists rather, and astronomers all agree on that, right?
There's a lot of debris.
And his 140 has friggin' video errors, you know? So he actually has 140. I would lose my mind. I would be so angry.
They're coming in from the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt.
So he's a 140er.
They're kind of messages from the distant reaches of
because he drops some frames on it,
which
is ridiculous because he never drops frames.
By something like Planet 9.
It's just so cursed. That's really cursed. I don't know why Dynamics does not deserve that. Fucking whatever. I think he's probably going for lower anyways. I would imagine maybe.
That's been the theory of the asteroid belt.
He said he would keep playing it. That's what he wrote in his comments too. Keep playing it on the side or some shit.
Has an important role to play. It's really essential that we are skeptical.
Otherwise, we'd all be following Zachariah Sitchin and waiting for the Anunnaki to land.
Exactly.
We would have sold our houses December 21st, 2012, and we'd all be going, "What the fuck? Now I'm homeless."
Exactly.
What makes it so painful is that not getting any stucks. You only pretty much play the start.
Debunking the bogus translations.
Fucking really shite.
Yeah, is he sitchiniswrong.com? Is that
Sitchiniswrong.com.
Yeah,
it's a very useful site. So we need
which is why it's painful.
I feel so sad. I love the idea.
Because you don't even
the aliens come down and manipulate
mix it up at all.
To mine gold. It's a wonderful story.
But unfortunately, it's a work of
but it's necessary.
It's not a work of fact.
I might even try.
I knew him. He was a fascinating man.
The ducking strat, honestly.
We had many conversations.
The glass, the fucking ace, but it's unnecessary.
I think he got carried away.
I think I can get a PV with one of these other methods.
Very lucrative, and it also became a source of identity to him. I followed him pretty closely as well. I've read The 12th Planet, and I got really into his research. And this is in my early pot smoking days when I first started smoking pots. Well,
I said a week to choose. I've used a heater, I know.
And then as I got wiser,
when I go to Miami, I know.
Maybe not
when I have money again, man.
Objectively why these things are so attractive.
I spent it all in Miami.
Than the practical. And so
something else.
But man,
again, I don't want to put Sitchin down, and I'm here also to say that Sitchin did a lot of really good work. He was a clever guy, and he did a lot of very, very, very.
It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was like I was supposed to have that fucking postdoc job.
Where was I going?
Well, we were talking about the difference between the
but
fantastical and the practical. That there's this inclination to accept things that are fun. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is that when you start talking about the Anunnaki, those from heaven to earth came, these fantastic creatures from.
Thank you. You've brought my memory back. I remembered what I was going to say. What's interesting?
You need some pot. I know
could be good. What's interesting is that the level of technology that Zachariah attributes to the Anunnaki / Nephilim, that level of technology is the level of technology that we had in the 1970s when we were. NASA was doing its stuff. So it's NASA technology from the 1970s.
I heard a conspiracy theory on Pole that the Surfside building in Miami that was destroyed was actually an assassination completion on a gentleman and his apartment that had evidence about child pornography or something.
Rather than that it's actually inherent.
There was also some interesting ideas that he had that turned out
Or
to be
like he was like a
ideas that
spy or
scientists had
something.
also proposed about preserving our atmosphere by levitating or by
Because
suspending.
it is really curious how the
reflective
building just
particles
fucking
in
collapsed.
our atmosphere, and that is something that the Anunnaki
And that whole history
were going to
of
use
the
gold
gentleman
for,
owning
because gold has
an
such
apartment
unique
in that
properties,
building
which is
and
why
him
they
dying
use gold
in
to
that
plate things,
moment.
because you can take a little tiny piece of gold, you can plate this entire
Oh
table.
god, another one.
Gold's a really
Oh good, another
spectacular
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
piece of, I mean, it's just,
Honestly,
there's
I
nothing
mean,
like it, right?
I don't want anybody to ever
There's a
take
lot of
down.
really good
Like
material
he's
in
never
Sitchin,
getting
but
stuff, man.
unfortunately,
Like ever.
the translations of the texts are not
I kind of
They
it's.
misrepresent
I mean,
text.
imagine it was
What he did
natural.
He took a 19th century translation and he massaged it. So
It'd
that
be
it
really
would,
frightening.
fit his argument, and that's a pity. So we need skeptics.
Because it could happen to any building. I guess it could happen to any building if it was a fucking assassination attempt.
Drive to criticize anything that's not mainstream.
But there was a lot of things linked to it, like the fact that it was bulldozed right away and that they didn't investigate it or whatever. They immediately bulldozed it and like cemented it up or whatever.
Ready to let go of wonderful ideas.
I mean, I'm not judging it, but
to me that because of what Sitchin has been sort of criticized for, people now ignore the stuff that's absolutely undeniable, like the actual
I forget
stone
I don't know the
tablets
name of the
themselves,
guy in the
tablets,
story,
where you can see the
but it was
depictions of the solar
convincing.
system. Somehow or another, these people from 6,000
And I think he had
plus years
documents
ago
or a
had
hard drive or some
detailed
shit.
map of the solar
I had a
system
clear idea.
with the size in like a relatively correct order, in the planets in the right place. Like they somehow or another knew that Jupiter was bigger than Mars.
Because he did
knew these
die.
things
That
in
was like
some
it was
weird
factual.
way, and we don't
That
know
guy,
why. We
like
don't know how.
government. I think he was a
Also,
spy
the
or something.
Caduceus
I think he was a spy with
representing
information.
The double helix of the DNA. That's a really fascinating concept too. That
That's
the
what they say.
Caduceus is used for medicine, and it's used to I mean, it's just he had some really interesting points. Zechariah did. So it's kind of too bad there was so much
A
crazy.
lot of Jewish
involved.
people died that day
What any
too.
of us should do when we're
Really
exploring
sad.
the deep and hidden mysteries of the past is to go to a lot of different sources. Go to a lot of. Don't just stick with the mainstream. Don't just stick with the alternatives. But try to bring it all together. And in a way, that's what I try to do in my books. Except the skeptics still hate them.
Yeah, but it's just so hard because it's so fun to go with the crazy story.
Yeah.
Like the
Anyone
alien
that's
story is
anti-Semitic
that
needs
was
to go to
so
Miami.
Very compelling story.
I mean, if
Because
we found some sort of evidence of aliens, it would be
One, you
so
can't be sad in
spectacular.
Miami.
It's a simple
Two,
alien. Like, I've
there's a
always
lot of
said this,
Jewish
if we
people in
found a
Miami,
jellyfish
and they
on
make
the
like good
moon, we'd
food and
freak
stuff,
out.
and good music
But,
and
you know,
culture
there's
and whatever.
really complex, bizarre things at the
So it's
bottom of
impossible
our
for you to
ocean that
be-
we never discovered because they're just not
Or go to
the
Israel.
correct location for us to be excited.
And then the other issue, we're getting slightly off our flood topic here.
That's
but
okay.
but the other issue of
Miami,
of
man.
entities that
It's just
the-
so
the
amazing.
encounters with entities. Anybody who's smoked DMT will know that
It's just
as
so
I have,
amazing.
as you have, that will know that you do encounter entities in the DMT state, and they do communicate with us. And there's a lot of parallels with the ETs or the aliens as they're described in modern UFO abduction accounts. And Rick Strassman, have you ever had him on your show?
You know, Rick got sick. He was
Yeah.
supposed to be here a couple of times. We're trying to reschedule it now.
Yeah.
But he had some pretty serious health issues,
I
and
know.
we had a date scheduled out. But I love that guy. I've had a chance to sit down with him a couple of times
Yeah.
and talk to him.
But of course, you presented DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yeah, he's brilliant, and
Yeah.
he's so important to me because I remember when I did it, I was so confused. I mean, to me, it was like my first DMT experience changed everything I thought about the world, and I immediately didn't give a shit about aliens anymore.
Right.
Like it was almost instantaneous. Like
Yes.
before then, I was like, Roswell, they got the ship, man.
Yeah.
It's in a hangar. But what I encountered doing DMT was so spectacularly alien
Yes.
that the pedestrian concept of something that looks like a person but has a bigger head
Yeah.
and large eyes.
And higher tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As weird and cool as it would be if it was real, it was nothing. I mean, literally not 1/1,000,000th as interesting.
Guys,
as what you
this is
actually
why I didn't
when you DMT.
do
That's the alien.
forced
That's the
stuff.
aliens, the utterly alien
because it's
realm
just so-
filled with alien intelligences who communicate. And of course, again, the skeptics
We
say,
haven't
it's all
had
just made up in your
one-
brain, but we don't know that. And
We
Rick
don't
is
know
open
that.
to the possibility that we are dealing with areas
We
of
haven't had
reality that are not
one.
normally accessible to our senses, and that
That's
become
insane.
accessible to our senses by retuning the
That's
received
so
wavelength of the brain.
just
which
bad.
he suggests DMT does, and I think that's very plausible. And at the very least, those who are interested in UFOs and aliens should be also investigating this line of inquiry. Can we use changes in consciousness to understand the majestic complexity of the universe in which we live? And I think the answer is definitely yes. And many
Not
of Rick's
one.
volunteers, I paraphrase, but they came back with reports that the entities who'd
Quite
encountered
the arduous
"We're
journey.
so glad you've discovered this technology. Now we can communicate with you much more easily. You know, it's fascinating. So there's a technology for encountering other intelligences, and against that, this mechanistic, simplistic alien meme that's going around now that they're a bit like us, but they came here in higher tech. It's dull by comparison.
It is dull by comparison. If you're interested in anybody, the book is amazing. It's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and he has a new book that he's putting out.
What?
about
Like,
DMT
why?
and the spirit and the solar prophecy.
Why?
Yeah, and he's just a really, really interesting guy. But his experiments that he did were the first, I think, in many, many decades to get approved by the government.
Correct.
So he did everything above ground. I mean, he was above board.
He did, and because it was government approved, his remit was that he had to find some therapeutic benefit for DMT, and he couldn't actually. But that's not the point. I'm sure actually there are therapeutic benefits, but that's not the point. The point is here is a tool for investigating the mystery of consciousness and the mysterious nature of reality. And I mean, fuck me, if we get 5 or 6 volunteers who haven't compared notes, all coming back who've met entities who said, we're so happy you found this technology.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain it as just to reduce it to brain activity.
Not only that, when we talk about things that are so big and are ignored by mainstream culture, this is one that's just like that. You're talking about an endogenous human chemical that not only is in us, but is in thousands of different plants. I mean, how many different plants contain DMT?
Huge number.
Huge number.
Very prosaic ones like peas and, you know.
Well, there's the
Like
amazing
acacia.
story.
Acacia.
That's what I was going to say.
The
There's an amazing
Australian
story.
national tree is actually illegal.
Isn't that? But the Jerusalem, the professors from the University of Jerusalem, I believe.
Benny Shannon.
Yeah, where they were talking about, they believe that that's what the story of the
Yeah,
burning
man.
bush and Moses is.
Remember
So
that
that
PETA?
is,
That
mimosa
Jewish
with the DMT
PETA
and Syrian rue with the monoamine
that I
oxidase
had
inhibitor.
once in
other words,
Miami?
It's ayahuasca. But
Probably
a
don't,
a
but
Middle Eastern
who was there
alternative of it,
for
doing
that
the same
stream?
thing, molecular.
And isn't it possible in some way that the idea of the
I think
burning
Rolls or
bush
Ferrari was
them
there.
figuring out how to
I think you were there in
dry or
Toronto.
extract DMT and burn it?
Very likely.
At a
Very
Middle
possibly,
Eastern
right? 'Cause
place.
they're
I
talking about
think
the burning bush
Angel
producing God,
Yeah.
and it just so happens that
Azazel was
this
there.
bush is, the acacia tree is incredibly common and super rich in DMT, and it's all over
Baron,
the
I
area.
think.
And I should probably insert at this point that if you're at all familiar with the Masonic ritual,
I think,
the acacia plant plays a central role.
Oh my gosh, what's his name? Oh,
1%
what's his name? But
Every now and
You're
then,
one of those insiders.
every now and then on Facebook, Randall, I get accused
real
of
pink
being a
elephants.
Freemason. Hancock is a Freemason. As
Cloud
though, it
nine.
explains, as though it explains everything. I know lots of Freemasons.
Cloud
I've
nine,
spoken
where's
in
Cloud
Masonic
nine
lodges,
at?
but I'm an author and I shouldn't belong to clubs, you know.
I went to a few.
It's
I
okay,
went
you can
to a
learn Cloud
wedding
Nine, I'm just-
that my friend Duncan Trussell
we
was
miss you, man.
performing at for these two Satanists in like 2003, and to this day, it was one of the LaVeys, Anton LaVey or Stanton LaVey, whatever, is his son, and his son got married. It was some young hedonist, you know, and they call themselves Satanists. And so Duncan performed at this wedding, and I went there. To this day, I get fucking tweets about being a Satanist. So I can't join your little club, pal. I can't be one of your Masons.
I need to confess here, Graham.
Yes.
You didn't realize this, but I secretly initiated you.
Oh my God.
Oh, you're in. How do you get in? How do you secretly initiate somebody? Can you do that for real?
No.
Oh, okay. Scared me.
I sort of did.
Sort of?
Sort
Well, you
of.
could get him in if you wanted to, though, right? If you know the people.
Oh, of course.
There you go.
Even you, Joe.
I don't think so. It's not happening. I met a couple of Masons. They're very cool.
Well, most Masons don't really understand the corpus of symbolism that they're sitting on top of. I got to say that. Not to get off on the Freemasons, but simply
Right.
there's a mass of symbolism, and that's the whole. That's the thing that they're custodians of, and most of them don't have a clue what it means. But they're doing an important job by preserving this corpus of symbolism through the layout of the lodge, the meaning of every component in the lodge, because it's a purely astronomical allegory. And then you have the Masonic carpets, and that's where you have the whole story of the comet, the flood. It's all there. The acacia plant, it's all there.
It's all, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's all also an integral part of how Washington, D.C. was designed. Is that true?
Yeah, to some extent. I haven't, I honestly haven't studied that too much.
What I've seen is that there's a bunch of videos where you can watch it where they sort of describe how the layout, is in some way some sort of sacred geometry.
I think
what it's based on.
Freemasons were massively involved in the construction of Washington, as they were of many great cities. The city I live in, England, has got major Masonic architecture.
So is it like people like me, like my initial prejudice? I hear something like the Masons, like, oh, fucking dude's in a cult, get out of here, leave me alone. Like we assume that all groups of people that follow anything somehow or another are wacky.
Masons, in my opinion, they're largely a drinking club for men. Mainly that's what it is.
Guys who let women in at all?
But you can make special arrangements to bring women into a lodge. For example, my wife's, when I've given a talk in a lodge, I've given talks in 2 or 3 lodges, been asked to do so, then they make a special ceremony to allow my wife Santa to come in, because I won't go anywhere without Santa. And so women can go in, but then there are others within Masonry who are pursuing deeply esoteric interest and exploring the mysteries, and you can have incredible conversations. In fact, there's just another group of people who are doing a thing. It's not for me. I would lose. I think if I joined Freemasonry, it would weaken me as an author. I think I'm better able to comment on these things.
It's too much.
That's interesting. Why do you think
it's too much, guys?
Well, because I think I have to remain open to all possibilities, and if I commit myself to a particular line, I don't commit myself to a particular religion. I don't commit myself to a particular men's club either. Which is what Masonry is. I think if I commit that, then ultimately I would become a spokesperson.
It's too much, man.
And I don't want to be that.
That makes a lot of sense considering your
2 hours.
And how important.
Are we really gonna go 2? Are we really gonna go 2 hours without getting a natural stock? Is that real life?
I could not.
You'd have to.
What?
I mean, and the initial thing where you were telling me about Ethiopia, that place where they believe that the Ark of the Covenant lays, which is one of the most bizarre ideas ever. And
that was my first book on historical mysteries, The Sign and the Seal.
To try and you go into it, like, it's so interesting. But I've always imagined you as a young guy forced to sort of reconcile with this bizarre piece of evidence. You've got these old men that have cataracts in their eyes, like they're around radiation sites.
Guys, I can't believe it.
See this thing, and they claim they have the Ark.
Guys and girls.
What the fuck is in there?
It was the beginning of a magic. It was the beginning of a magical journey for
Ladies
me.
and gentlemen.
Guys like me, man. When I read Fingerprints of the Gods, it was. To me, it was one of those books I just couldn't put down, and it was so mind-blowing. And this, again, was in the heart
I'm take a break. I need to take a break, a little break.
Fingerprints was published in 1995.
I need to really reconsider everything.
In 2015, and I would say in that time, when I made the case for a lost civilization and a global cataclysm in Fingerprints of the Gods, I can't begin to account for the amount of hostility and anger and rage that I generated in the academic community. The idea was considered to be absolutely absurd. 20 years later, with Magicians of the Gods, it's not so absurd anymore. The evidence is mounting. We have incredible evidence now for a global cataclysm in exactly the period that counts, between 12,800 to 11,600 years ago, and we have sites like Göbekli Tepe, we have a redefinition of the Sphinx. The whole area is just about to explode in the future. We're on the edge, I believe, of a paradigm shift, and this comet material is central to it.
What I really appreciate about your courage is that you've also had the courage to admit when you've made mistakes. Yeah. You don't in any way pretend to be some sort of bearer of secret knowledge that no one else possesses.
And absolutely not a guru. Yeah. I don't want to be anything like that. I'm a reporter. That's right. What I am, and I'm a reporter who's reporting on offbeat subjects, and to some extent I'm an outsider. So one of the talks I do now is about being an outsider. I think there is a place for outsiders in society.
Well, I don't think you're an outsider. I think you're an outsider from the established mainstream ideas. I just think that ideas.
Me and Randall are the same. We're both outsiders in that area and working in different fields to get into this.
But don't you think that these established channels that were so deeply grooved in distributing information, those things have widened so wide now, where you're getting. A professor could do a podcast. Like he could teach a class and he could write a book, or he can do a podcast on a certain subject. And like you're aware of Dan Carlin and that Hardcore History podcast,
Sure.
which I just can't stop raving about. Well, what he's done is brought historical, accurate, but really dramatic stories of real events that took place to millions. Like, that's just that no one's doing that. Like, this is, but it's not mainstream. Well, what's more mainstream than being #1 on the iTunes podcast list, which he is all the time? What is more mainstream than he must be getting millions of downloads?
It's part of the big change that's taking place in our society, that the old structures are being overthrown, they're being thrown away. It's a very uncomfortable time, it's a very uncertain time, it's a very exciting time.
Right.
Because we can build out of this something amazing in the future. The internet's had a huge part to play in it, the fact that people can communicate with one another all around the world.
Well, since I've had a web presence in the last, I was a late comer, but maybe two to 3 years ago, I've been getting contacted by, professionals from around the world. I've got probably a dozen major ones. Geologists who want to know more about it. And interestingly, you said earlier about debating. I'm always looking for somebody to debate about this.
Right.
Because I have questions, and I'm thinking maybe somebody who would disagree with me on something could still help me answer some of those questions.
Right.
But I try to associate as much as possible and hang out with professionals in the field. And of course, what I discover is that a lot of them are working in these things part-time, almost clandestinely, without making it part of their, if I go on a field trip with geologists into the floodlands, none of them are really working on it full-time. It's all part-time. They're working for the government, they're working for the oil companies, or, exploration, mineral exploration, whatever. They're doing this research into geological catastrophes on their own time.
Right.
But recently, just last summer, I got invited to actually present some of my research to the Atlanta Geological Society, which is the largest society of professional geologists in the Southeast. So I jumped at the chance rather than, and so I presented hoping that I would get challenged, that somebody would say, wait a second, there's a flaw in your thinking. Didn't happen.
So did you make friends with some of these mainstream geologists?
Oh yeah, well, I've been known, when I just took a trip for, in September, spent 10 days back out in the floodlands, and I had a geologist with me on that trip. So yeah, I'm getting to know more and more people who are working as, well, I majored in geology in college, so I still am in touch regularly with the head of the geology department. I see her pretty much on a regular basis and have been keeping her apprised of some of my stuff. And she has offered to sponsor me at whatever point I think that I can pull it together as a dissertation. But we'll see how that goes. My objective was to learn geology, not to become a professional geologist. I wasn't interested in working for the government or working for, the energy industry. I had geological questions, and that's why I majored in geology.
And you've walked the walk, and in my opinion, you know more about this stuff than 10 fully PhD geologists.
Yeah, you always freak me out. So what's fascinating to me about all of this is that I think what you've done has been very measured. Everything you back up with facts and photographs and descriptions and disclaimers. When you say, well, it is possible, you will go down other various paths. You're not dogmatic about these ideas, but you've spent so much time going over this. I don't know if there's a commensurate guy in mainstream archaeology that has been public about it the way you have been. Because if there is, I feel like we probably would have heard about it. Your podcasts have been, the ones that we've done, they've been seen by millions of people. They've been listened to by millions of people. The information's getting out there and
it's making a real difference.
You're always going to have the guys like, I think Michael Shermer's very important. I'm not criticizing him, but that knee-jerk reaction to do something, to mock something or put down something that's not mainstream. Like one of his tweets, he said, "You know what archaeology with evidence is?" And he wrote archaeology. Like, why would you even tweet that? That doesn't even make any sense. Like, that's someone who's not paying attention to your work. All you do is focus on evidence.
I'm reminded of the Shakespearean line, "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." Why does he need to say that it's got the evidence? It's like Fox News saying fair and balanced.
He's tweeting at you with this.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, your entire book is based on photographic evidence.
Yeah.
And all the other various pieces of evidence. Your
Facts,
whole thing
documents,
it's all
detailed
about
research.
examining all these pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
It's not these aren't things that you've invented.
No.
These are actual real sites that you can look at.
I'm drawing inferences from them that they don't like. That's the thing.
Well, Robert Schoch and guys like him are so important.
Yeah.
Guys who have the courage, who's a Boston University professor,
Absolutely.
who has the courage to look at the stones and say, this is the product of water erosion.
Kudos to Robert Schoch as
so
a
few guys
geologist,
like
as a career academic geologist who's taken that risk and put himself out there and followed the evidence where it leads. Another one is Danny Hillman Natawajaya in Indonesia, who's been responsible for the investigation of this extraordinary site of Gunung Padang, where work has been stopped since 2014. Again, he's a highly credentialed geologist. He's Indonesia's leading expert in megathrust earthquakes, but he's been looking at archaeology, bringing his geological expertise to that. So things are changing. We are finding academics who are willing to engage and willing to discuss. I got into a very interesting email correspondence with a guy called Daniel Lohmann at Baalbek, from the German Archaeological Institute, who's an architect and an archaeologist, and he was very civil with me, and he answered my questions. We went into it in depth. We had quite a long debate. That's very refreshing. That kind of thing wasn't happening 20 years ago.
Yeah, that is very refreshing. Now, what about those pyramids in Bosnia? Has that been, what is the deal with that? Are those things...
I've been there. I know Sam Osmanagic personally. Sam is the guy who's promoted the site. I like Sam very much. I must say, when I'm in his aura, I'm extremely convinced. But when I look rationally at the so-called pyramids, I don't think they're pyramids. I think they're hills. I did spend, with Sam showing me around, I did spend 3 days in Bosnia looking at the so-called Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Love Pyramid, and so on and so forth. I do see that a tourist industry has built up around this, and it's a fabulously beautiful, intriguing site. It's a massive, beautiful, mountainous place, but they are hills. They are not pyramids. Impression is given that there are tunnels, passageways inside the pyramids. That's not true. The passageways are about 2.5 kilometers away. They're very low tech. I just don't see it, and for that reason I did not cover the Bosnian pyramids in Magicians of the Gods. I'm not going to say they're not pyramids. I'm not going to write a book saying that they're wrong, but they didn't excite me enough to justify devoting a chapter to them. There's much more exciting and important archaeological discoveries that are being made, like Göbekli Tepe, which need more space.
And there's some pyramid-like structures or hills in China as well, right?
There's thousands of pyramids in China. Siam, the province of Siam. It's just the moment you land there with your aircraft, you're seeing pyramids everywhere. I've been there. There are certainly hundreds and hundreds of them, distributed across fields, vanishing off into the distance in all directions. They've been terraced and used as agriculture, but local farmers grow crops on them. I went there with Chinese archaeologists. They haven't excavated a single one, not one.
Why not?
They said, we don't have, this was nearly 10 years ago I was there, they said they've probably got the money now, but they said then they didn't have the money. They said, we're an old country, we don't mind if we wait 200 years to get to grips with this.
Jesus Christ.
And the famous tomb of the first emperor is part of this pattern. It is also a pyramid, it has also not been excavated. The terracotta army around it has been found.
The terracotta army's amazing. It was on display somewhere, wasn't it? Where you can go and see it live?
Yeah, they did some kind of traffic.
I'd want to see that thing. I'd want to look at those things. What a bizarre concept. Now, these pyramids, so this one that this emperor was buried in that had the terracotta army, was that a pyramid as well?
It is a pyramid.
It is.
Absolutely. It's a man-made pyramid. The terracotta army was buried around its edges, not in the pyramid itself.
So the army was there to protect him?
Yeah, to protect his soul into the afterlife seems to have been the idea. And then there's a mythology that's come down that within the pyramid is a lake of mercury, that there are mechanical devices in there which will fire arrows at you if you go in. That there's a whole story about how intensely protected it is, and up to this day it's not been excavated.
That's so crazy. How could someone leave that alone?
And you know, even major archaeological sites like Tiwanaku in Bolivia, for example, you'll find that only about 2% of the site has been excavated. I don't know how we can draw inferences about the whole site from a tiny little fraction like that. And that's the problem, I think, with archaeology, and it's why we have to, consider another way.
We're looking at an image of the terracotta army now in front of this pyramid, and it is spectacular. Now that I think about it, I don't think that was on display anywhere. I think maybe they had a couple of them.
They brought some of them. They came to
Yeah.
the British Museum. There were a number of museums.
But it's so much bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah.
I mean, how many? There's thousands.
Yeah.
There's thousands of these terracotta figures.
Absolutely.
And this pyramid was made out of what? Is it stones?
Rammed earth mainly.
Okay. So they just sort of shaped the ground. They just dug around
Yeah,
it.
they brought in earth and
Mhm.
turned it into a pyramidal mound.
But it wasn't.
It's
So
not
it's just.
It's not
stacked
massive
on
stone
top.
blocks. It's not massive stone. That's why they can grow crops on the sides of some of these pyramids.
Wow, how weird.
Yeah.
So they would build these giant mounds of dirt and then dig holes in them and support them. And like,
Well, they
what would
probably
do on the
they
inside of
probably
it?
created the interior, subterranean as they were building the whole thing.
Mm. And they just stack dirt on top of it.
Yeah.
Wow, what a weird way to make a house.
Yeah, and then we have to consider this with archaeological sites all around the world. Is that
Mhm.
any site may actually not be the product of just one culture, but may have been reworked and worked over and used by many different cultures over
This
many
is
different periods.
stunning to me. I found out about this because of a friend of John Anthony West who was here with him. He showed me, he lives in China, and he was showing me some video of it. And I was like, how do I not know about this? I had no idea there was this many of them. So here's one that's exposed. What's this?
Controversial ancient pyramids of China.
That one
Yeah.
looks
Yes,
exposed. It's
and that
made of
one looks
stone.
blocky. Yeah.
Well, that is another thing about China that we just don't have a clue. When we think about the age and scale of things, we're so silly. We've only been around since 1776 is when the country was established. It's not really that long ago. You're dealing with China. You're dealing with literally thousands of years of civilization, all rising and falling and taking place and adapting and growing, all in this one area. That's still, in our eyes, in a lot of ways, it's kind of behind, right? I mean, they're behind environmentally, they're behind when it comes to human rights.
Consider this. The Portuguese in the late 1400s have rounded the Cape of Good Hope, and they've entered the Indian Ocean in their little ships. They've entered the Indian Ocean and they actually establish a huge empire. They go to Malacca, they go all over the place, okay? The seas are open to them. If they had come 40 years earlier, they would have encountered the Chinese treasure ships. Ships that were 50 times larger than the little caravels that the Portuguese were sailing in. Vast, and you know what the Chinese did at that time? They went through a period where they felt they just wanted to give gifts to people. And they put together these huge fleets carrying incredibly precious gifts, silks and ceramics, and they took them all around the Indian Ocean and they just gave them to people. So off the coast of East Africa and in East Africa you can find remains of this pottery from this episode. And then a Chinese emperor came along and he closed the doors, burned all the boats, shut everything down, and didn't let anybody speak to China for 200 years.
Whoa, what a dick.
Well, he felt that it was time for the Chinese culture to turn inward.
Yeah.
And they were afraid that their ancient culture, on one hand, there might have been maybe a laudable motive in that they were concerned that the ancient culture was going to get contaminated by too much contact with degenerate culture.
Yo, what's up, Christian? How you doing, man? I'm glad you're here, my man.
Constant
You
desire
are
to
my boy.
maintain
I am
current
your
situation.
boy.
It's human. We have to say it's some
appreciate
kind
it.
of
You're a nice
human
guy.
nature.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd love to see some of these images.
Sorry, I was just doing
There's
some
the drone stuff from the
banking,
Camas Prairie and
some
what
banking
else?
juggling on my phone right now. I
Let's
wasn't
have a look.
ignoring you.
got that picture there, Joe.
Those Chinese pyramids are still blowing
Doing
my
banking
mind.
They blow
stuff.
my mind as well.
I just
It's-
can't believe they haven't been excavated.
It's an eerie, spooky scene,
Juggling-
and I recommend
juggling
everybody to go to
accounts.
see it. And just it's incredible
Not to be
how
confused with juggaloing accounts.
and how unexplained it all is. And it's again, it feeds into my general point: is we don't remember our past.
What are we looking at here?
Well, dude, you should, man. Miami's great. There's great outdoor Miami
Yeah, you
courts.
look at this one that way.
It's insane.
Okay, this is the beginning.
In South Beach,
Get that mic right up to you there.
that basketball
Looking at
court
a place
is
in western
amazing.
Montana called Camas Prairie. You see some hills in the foreground.
The
and
park?
You see a basin in the background, right?
I forget the name of it. I forget
Right here on
the
top
name of the
this hill,
street
down
that it's
the
on.
side where you see that there are
It's
some
just off
quarrying
of Alton.
operations. Those are quarrying gravel.
It's between Alton
Everything you're looking
and
at here, this whole
Lincoln.
landscape between the hills are
I know
these
it's a huge
large masses
block,
of
but
gravel, trillions of tons of gravel. Now, what
It's
we're
the
going to do is
best.
we're going to start sweeping around as the video plays, and you're going to notice down
we had amazing
here
memories
a
doing that,
series of
playing there.
ribbons.
Oh, okay, I see that.
Okay, and I'm going to have
Oh, thanks, man. You're a nice guy, man.
Coming around, you
You're a
start
nice
seeing
guy,
the
man.
ripples on the landscape.
Thanks, man.
Let's pause right there. Right there, let's pause. Now, I wish I had a pointer, but if you look up, you're going to see a flat piece of land like a tongue coming out, rounded. Yeah, Jamie's.
I'll think about it, man. Thanks, man. I don't want to be so rejecting, but I'll think about it, man.
What's a delta? You know what a delta is? You ever heard of
I'm honored by the gesture.
Into a body of water, and it's carrying sediment. And because the river is moving along swiftly, it's carrying the sediment, but when it comes into the standing body of water, it slows down and it drops its sediment.
You're moving to Canada? Wow, congratulations, man.
For example, is built on a giant.
That's amazing. Are you serious? Congrats, dude.
It's built on a delta, right? Okay, so what we're seeing here is a delta.
That's awesome,
And
man.
then in front of it, we're seeing rippled landscape. Let's keep coming around, Jamie. And so
Rippled landscape that looks exactly like the beach looks.
yeah,
Yeah.
keep coming around with
That's
that.
the
Let's-
thing, it's fractal, because this
Yeah.
is the whole mystery of this, that this happens at a scale of inches on beaches and a scale of hundreds of feet here.
Stop again.
Good
Okay.
Lord.
Now, right here in the middle, you see a massive delta.
Yes.
Spewed out like a big tongue, splayed out. And then right down here, you start seeing the ripples. And there's a farmhouse. You see the farmhouse there? Now, those ripples are, the tallest ones are about the height of a 5-story building.
Just so dumb.
How bizarre.
Okay, let's keep swinging
Man,
around here.
Just stop it. Stop this for a second, if you don't mind.
No, I don't
So
mind.
these things, they're the size of a 5-story building. What is that? Like 70 feet or something like that? 50 feet? Okay. So those are 50 feet high.
Oh,
And
no worries, baby. How
much
was
water-
it?
We'll get to that. Let's see the rest of it.
And these are just dirt, right?
They're well. If you dig into one, what you're going to find is they're a massive. Okay, let's pause again.
Whoa.
Look at this.
This is crazy.
This is totally crazy. This is one of the craziest things you'll ever see.
This is
right
these ripples, repeated ripples in an area where there's nothing else like it.
This is the fingerprints of the flood. That's
Yeah.
what it is.
Wow. Where can someone look at this? How does someone look at this?
In real?
You know, this right now, this what we're looking at. This is this video.
Well, my colleague Brad Young did this with his drone, and I think he's got it on the website Geocosmic Rex.
Is this being played in the YouTube video right now? Okay. All right. So the YouTube people are cool with it. If you're listening on iTunes, find it, man. Find it on YouTube. But it's worth looking at. Is what my point. This is mind blowing shit.
And I think you made the crucial point, Joe, which is that we can understand what this is because we can see it on any beach. We can
Yeah.
see how water flows receding across a sandy medium will produce ripples. But here, they're on this unbelievable scale where they're hundreds of feet long and 50 feet high, where they dwarf houses, and they're lying all across. And what that tells us is that a huge water flow went across this plain and did this.
Seeing it from this perspective
Yeah.
above, which is a rare perspective unless you're in a plane or a helicopter or something, you get a chance to look at it this way, you really get a better sense of what it is. If you were on the ground there, you'd probably say, oh, look at all the hills.
It's hard to
Yeah,
see.
you don't
Yeah.
quite get the impression. Now, we did visit this location, and to that day it was overcast, so you don't quite get the effect like you do when a low sun angle. Really helps you to see what's going on in the landscape.
Can I ask you, is there a dispute to this? Is there a,
No, nobody disputes it.
nobody
disputes
disputes
it.
this is
No,
from a flood?
not anymore.
Wow.
No. In fact, it was this JT Pardee.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Nobody disputes that it was caused by massive water flows.
Exactly.
But
These
those same
hills.
people would still not buy into the notion that there was this one humongous flood.
Okay, so they think it's an accumulative effect, but that this was all created
This
by
was the bottom
water.
of Lake Missoula, right?
Yes, and this is supposed to actually represent the draining of Lake Missoula.
Right.
Whereas I argue from a number of different reasons that this is the filling of Lake Missoula.
I have a friend of mine who, his friend lives in Montana, and they found a dinosaur on his ranch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like really recently.
That's a nice thing to find.
We should come
Yeah.
back to that because there's a connection here.
Yeah, the Great Western Inland Sea, all that area. There was, this was a crazy place at one point in time.
Still is, arguably.
Yeah, in a different way.
The water here, Joe, that did this, the way to visualize this is to begin to think of tsunami. You have to think tsunami because
Right.
tsunami is the closest scale of water flow that we've experienced in modern times. river flood has even approached this. You know, no flood in any floodplain.
Nothing that we can put into perspective.
Right. The closest we can get to it is a tsunami. But even there, you got to picture the tsunamis that we've experienced in the last decade and a half, and you know, in Indonesia and Japan.
Oh, that's nice to Christian. You're a nice guy, man. I will think about it, man.
Relative to the oncoming wave and how far distant you were from it. Here, what you have to visualize is a tsunami sweeping over the land that's over 1,000 feet.
I'm strapped for cash, man. I have like no cash right now.
Trace the high water marks on the hillsides are clearly left. The high water marks are clearly etched into the hillsides. So we now know, based upon the study of the ripples, and the water here was moving down. It's filling this basin. It's rushing in a great tsunami from the north of fresh water, meltwater, coming off the ice sheet. And it's sweeping down over this land at probably 200 or 300 million cubic feet per second, which is an inconceivable amount of water. It's many times in excess of every river flowing on Earth, flowing today all at once. It's beyond that many times, 10 or 20 times beyond.
One of the trickier things about water is that water in itself is kind of fractal in some sort of a weird way. When you look at the actual molecule of water, it's almost like we don't distinguish it as being a fractal thing because we see it as like this moving flow. But if you're looking at the actual molecules of water, a cup of water that you dip your fingers in, which is seemingly completely innocuous, becomes this massive element of change when the volume is 1,000 feet high and just rolling over with massive amounts of weight behind it. It's that same stuff.
Massive amounts of weight. Enough weight that it's actually causing seismic responses.
I can't even imagine. Yeah, how much weight are you talking about?
Man, dude, if I was rich, I would, man. That's what I want you to understand, my homie. If I was rich, I would.
We don't have a scale like in our minds as a reference, like the difference.
You know what I mean? And yes, the system is getting between brotherhood, but when you're fucking strapped, you're strapped, man. I got like nothing.
They go way out, miles out to get to these crazy waves, and we ride them in. They're like 60, 70 feet high. Like that's the comparison, almost like a glass of water to those waves, and then
it scales up, it scales up, it scales up. At a certain point, it can change the whole story of civilization.
Almost doesn't compute. Like,
and you know what to do is to make more money? Yeah, I know.
Here is 3 orders of magnitude.
That's what I'm doing, man. To bust my ass on Uber Eats.
In other words, over 1,000 times greater. In terms of peak discharge,
made 95 deliveries already. 100% positive feedback. 100. 95 deliveries, 100%. Like, that's incredible.
One place, one locale on 5 states where you can trace
that's unbelievable.
An ocean of fresh water sweeping across the entire.
That's even better than statistically predictable. If you're going to say what are the probabilities, assuming some sort of distribution of responses, because you have to assume some sort of randomness in the response of people, but no, 100%. It's fucking amazing.
And this is, I mean,
I'm bragging now because I don't know how much longer that's going to go for.
The comet impact on the ice cap. This is why I feel that the research in this field is so vital.
Okay, right there. Yeah. Got here. Notice.
This is crazy. That's a beach.
Yeah, but it's a beach. It's a beach for giant monsters. Is what it is. You can see in this here that you've actually got 3 massive currents converging here. You see that. Over here on the right, you've got a massive current coming in that would be from the west. And then we would be standing looking down current. Of course, the drone I'm guessing here is about 200 feet in elevation. So the top of the water was another 800 to 900 feet above this perspective right here. And it's moving very, very fast. And it's sweeping down into a river valley that's down in those mountains you see in the distance. And from there it's being carried down and joining up other equally as large floods coming in from other valleys. And all of this is happening at once, and it's covering 5 states, basically. And that's just one region that's being affected by this sudden catastrophic melting of the ice sheets.
We are dealing with the largest flood that ever occurred on Earth. It's as simple as that.
This is insane. I mean, it's insane to look at.
And
Is
it
it the
happened
largest?
here in North America, and it happened 12,800 years ago, and its story has yet to be fully told.
Isn't it possible there was something larger before, like the 65 million year ago one that hit the Yucatan? Like, what kind of an impact did that have?
Well, it actually would, because if that
Different
had
kind of
happened
impact, right?
12,000 years ago, we wouldn't be having
Let's
none of
see.
us
Would be
meeting
here.
today.
Yeah, that'd be a wrap, right?
Yeah,
What
that
the
was a
fuck are people gonna
single
do?
object about 6 miles wide.
Report it?
That was a much more devastating impact than the impacts of 12,800 years ago. But nevertheless, those impacts of 12,800 years ago were really, really bad, and they did stuff
Dude,
like
a
this.
documentary just came out called Canada is Dying on YouTube. If you Google Canada is Dying, there's a new documentary that came out that you might enjoy.
When you understand
I guess they want us to
the
carry,
scale of this
yeah.
phenomenon and the severity,
Dude, you told me.
inconceivable
I didn't
severity
believe you.
in the aftermath of an
Yeah,
event like
I didn't
this,
believe
what
you.
would remain
They
of a-
showed Queen's
of a
Park.
city,
Are there
a
really
village,
homeless
a
tents set up in Queen's Park?
Not a goddamn thing.
No,
nothing.
nothing.
Is it just
With nothing with
fucking
it.
tent city now in Queen's
And
Park?
most things wouldn't
That's what the
exist.
video
You find,
showed.
like, an old refrigerator or a car
It's
out on
literally
lots
right
in
outside
someone's
Parliament.
backyard in the south.
It's like
It's
literally
in the
Parliament
1970s,
backyard.
And the rot has gotten into the frame.
Nature's going to eat it up.
Yeah, nature's eating it up just in a couple of decades. What's it going to be like in a couple thousand years? It's
We
gonna be
should
non-existent.
not be surprised about
Guy,
how
this
little
this
we
guy
know.
is never stuck.
This is also a company
Yes,
that
they
the idea
cleared
we've
it, but
got the
yes,
hostile
wow,
working
that's
out in
wild.
Syria This is what we teach in schools. This is what our friends in
That's
the media
really
report.
wild.
This is the fact. It's not
I
the
guess
fact we
Toronto
don't
has
know.
had
There's been so much
parks
lost,
like
so
that,
many
like the
missing
one
pieces of the
on-
puzzle that we're desperately
what's
trying
it
to
called?
stitch together, and it's important, I think, that we actually do
What
get
road
some
is that?
clarity
Dundas?
on events like this, because we still live on this planet.
Fucking
and we
Nightmare
have
Park?
kids, and we have a future, and we want to.
Hopefully.
We want to. Hopefully, we want
Not
to.
if one of those big boys comes our
West.
Well, that's right. But again, I come down to this, which
Yeah.
is
West
we are
of downtown.
not dealing with gloom and doom and the end of the world. We're dealing with a problem that humanity should be confronting. We should not be sticking our heads in the sand. We should be confronting this problem. And that's why I support the work of the Comet Research Group, because they are
Oh,
the only
whatever.
people right now who are confronting
Christy
this problem
Pitts.
and really getting to grips with it.
We should all confront it. We should
No, that one's
absolutely
beautiful, man. That one's amazing.
Because if
The
something like this can
fucking
happen
ghetto
once,
one near
what's-
the
what really makes
near the
sense is how
annex,
many
man.
stories of floods there are in ancient times, and how many parallels there are.
What the fuck is
How
it?
many there are from North America?
Oh,
Like the fucking
dozens and
nightmare
dozens.
one.
Yeah, it was the
Southwest Annex.
the Indian artist who spent 30 years or so pre-Civil War, I think.
I forget the name of
after
it.
the Civil War, painting Indians of different tribes.
Allen
he wrote a book
Park?
called Last Rambles Among the North
Maybe.
American Indians. Very, very interesting book. But what really is interesting to me when I read the book years and years ago was his final conclusion of the book. He says, after all of these different customs and traditions that have been
It's
handed down
on.
from
What
these
road is it
tribes,
on?
they all have one thing in common. They all have a memory or a story of a gigantic world-destroying flood.
Dundas
And he-
West?
this has included tribes down into Central America that he visited.
King West? Yeah, it
believe
might be
the
King
Americans
West.
Are the repository, the Native American peoples who have been subjected to so
It's
much
big, it's a big
destruction
park.
over the years. They, in their mythology, their traditions, their memories, they
Whatever.
keep more of this than almost
I'm gonna
anything
Google it.
else. It's really tragic.
Wait today? Yes, Christian. Yes. That was the heaviest encampment. Yes, Christian. Heck yeah, man. I'm gonna look it up on the maps because it's just driving me crazy.
And remember the past. So not only do we have cataclysms wiping the human memory, but we ourselves actively get involved in the human memory and wipe it. We rub it out. The burning of the Maya codices by the Spanish
What the fuck
friars,
is it?
thousands and thousands. God knows what was in those documents.
Yeah.
You know, we might have had a whole other story about
Trinity
ourselves if we
Bellwoods, I
had
think.
But instead we're this
Yeah.
cannibalistic species that just goes and
Trinity
just
fucking
smashes
Bellwoods.
everything to bits.
It's a weird impulse
That's
that
the
human
one.
beings have is when they move into an area and they take over.
Nightmare.
What they like to do is destroy their icons. Destroy it. What's going on with ISIS and all these ancient Buddhist structures? It's 1,000-plus-year-old beautiful sculptures.
Trinity fucking
blowing
Bellwoods.
them up, you know, and
You
praise
wrote
God.
we talked about that before. I think you
Very bizarre. It's
wrote
very
about it
bizarre
before.
information that we have, but it's almost like we don't want people to know.
Hey boy, has to go down doors, man.
It's a bizarre,
Hey dude,
almost
have a good night, dude. Thanks for being here, man. Thanks for
wipe
nice
out the past. You just
discussion and talk.
moving
Or
forward.
is there some
Other
trauma?
Dundas
Is there some
Bathurst.
collective
That's
trauma,
talking
some
to her part.
deeply suppressed memory
Homeless.
that
Oh
that
yeah.
we can't quite confront?
Dundas Bathurst.
Exactly the thought I had, because I think that's the one of those areas where
Wow, insane.
was mankind in him.
No way.
That somehow we carry the trauma, because once you begin to
Oh man.
get the picture of these events,
You too, Christian, in a platonic way, in a non-homosexual way. There's anything wrong with being homosexual, but it's just please stop saying that. Thanks, man. It's just too weird.
If they lived at all. And
Appreciate it.
Obviously they did, because here we are, but again, the evidence is emerging of major cultural collapse.
If you had a guess, what percentage of the population of human beings, just as obviously,
Just please listen to
but
me.
how many do you think were wiped out?
Thanks. Cool.
Half of them? Three-quarters of them?
I don't think that would be unrealistic. No.
It doesn't seem like it would be.
Have a good
If
night,
it
man.
was that number, and those people, that's enough for people to survive. And if it was
Oh my
that
god,
number,
guys, like stop this fucking weird shit,
strange
please.
fucking mythical past they would have.
The other thing to bear in
Please.
mind, in the world today, our world, we have an advanced civilization.
Have a good night, you too, man.
America, Germany, the industrialized technological countries. And we have coexisting with them in South America, in the Namibian desert, we have hunter-gatherers. So the notion that hunter-gatherers and an advanced civilization might
Guys, I think I'm gonna do
coexist
the
in
like the
same
forced
epoch of history should
stuff.
not be
It's been 2
speculated,
hours.
because we're doing
It's been
that
2
today.
freaking
And that's
hours.
what I would suggest happened before
No
12,800
natural
years
stuff.
ago, before
2
the cataclysm of
hours.
12,800 years ago, that there was a fairly advanced civilization that was capable of mapping and
2.
exploring the world, creating gigantic works of architecture, and it coexisted with hunter-gatherers. And who were the ones who survived the cataclysm? The answer is the ones who survived the cataclysm were the hunter-gatherers, not the sophisticated peoples. A few of them survived, and they then settled amongst the hunter-gatherers and tried to transfer some of their knowledge and skills to them. And it's the same today. If we were to have,
I do, man. I'm not working though. As I said before, it's like a side job, man. It's not like a full-time job. It's like a side thing. Yeah, like the opportunity is still there, but man, I'm sorry. Like I'm just, I don't know. I
That's
haven't.
what they do. It's not a mystery to them. It's not even a problem. They do it.
I've been focusing on just making money now, right? With whatever way I can.
Their descendants would be
The other one, it didn't pay a salary. There's no salary. There's no job. It's a 100% commission based.
They could fly
So
around the planet. They could speak to one another on other sides of the earth. But they did something
I don't think
wrong.
it's for
They
me, but
fell
I'm
out
gonna
of
stick
harmony
with it.
the universe. They
I know
ceased
I
to
sent the invite to you, and I mean, it's still open and everything, and we can follow up on it. It's just
there would be a differential survival rate. Those who were, I would say,
I've been a
those who were
little
more technologically
uninspired
advanced are
just
less
because I
likely
haven't
to
made any
survive
money
because they
from it
depend on
yet.
a complex
I've made
interrelated
$0 from
network
it,
of
right?
skills. And any individual on his or her own, most of them, well, you're different, Joe, because you do know how to survive, but a lot of people don't know how
Man,
to
I
survive.
barely know how to survive. I'd most likely
But at
starve
least you've
to
worked
death.
at it, you
Yeah,
know.
but I'm not that good at it.
But
It's not-
most
it
of us,
doesn't-
most of us haven't even worked at it
I
at all.
know,
We
but
haven't got a clue.
let me
But yeah,
fucking
man,
open
I
up
know I
those
invited
eyes to all these
you,
people that think that you just
and I
go
know
out
you
there
said
and
you
shoot
wanted to
animals
join,
stay
and that
alive.
is still
Good
open,
fucking luck.
of course.
You're
I'm sorry
probably screwed
for
if
my
you have
lack
a
of
rifle.
leadership
Even
on
if you
this.
have a rifle, you're probably screwed.
I'm
If you're
growing as a
going out,
leader
you're
in
gonna
this,
fucking starve to death.
Right.
but it's really hard
extremely
to
difficult
Yes.
to get close.
convince someone
And yet
to
hunter-gatherers for thousands and thousands of years have
join when I
succeeded in
haven't
doing
made
that,
any
like
money yet.
the Bushmen of the Kalahari.
You know what I
There
mean?
was less humans and more animals.
Right.
I
I
would
think that's also part of the rub.
Okay.
It's like we're dealing with just one of
It's
the
a good
terrible things
education
we've done is taken
process.
these
You
giant
can make
swaths
lots of
land and
money,
made
but
them
I think
entirely inhabitable for
the main
wildlife.
value of it
Like
is
cities.
education.
Like how many people grow food in the city? What is the percentage? Is it even 1/10
Financial
or 1% of
education, which
people
is
in the city
extremely
grow their own
valuable.
food?
Probably
It's
not.
probably not even that. So you have these massive, essentially
can make a lot
deserts
of money.
where no wildlife exists other than predatory species like coyotes and ravens and things like that that take. And then you go out from there.
I'm not
and then
doubting
have
you.
these vast
I think you can make.
farmlands.
I think you
The
can
only
make
benefit of
millions.
the vast
I think
farmlands
you
is
can
the
make
amount of
millions,
deer that
Christian.
exist now is greatly more
But what I'm
than
saying is, I
Columbus.
can't guarantee that
But it's because
that
they've
you will
almost
through this
become an
business. But I can.
agricultural animal. It's
Yeah.
almost
I can
like
see you being
they're
very
almost
good
a
in this
domesticated
business. See you
animal. They're a
tomorrow.
free,
Thanks, man.
wild, domesticated animal. Like I have a friend who has
Really,
a farm in
'cause
Iowa.
you're
and when you go there, it's very
you're a
strange.
talker. You
because he's got
communicate. You're a
these
social
wild,
person.
giant,
You understand people. You
300-pound
listen. You're a good
forest horses
listener.
running around his backyard. I mean, they're fucking everywhere.
I think you'd be very good.
There's all these giant deer, and when we were there,
Me,
it's called
I'm
the rut,
impatient
so
and not a good
they're
listener.
horny, so the big bucks who usually hide, they show themselves.
I'm just so impatient with
This is
people.
a crazy place. Like there's all these wild animals that exist.
I hate talking on the phone. I hate it.
A game-rich place like
I
that, it's
fucking.
incredibly difficult to
Yeah.
get to. And you have to have vegetables.
I
You have to have
I
your own
reject my
vegetables.
friends
So let's
when they
imagine a
ask to
situation
call on the
where all the
phone.
resources of our cities, all
I
the
just hate it.
all the amenities, all the infrastructure are gone.
Most
And
of us are fucked.
I would say radically, I would say in fact our civilization, which appears so strong, is actually very, very.
So I don't think I'd be very good at this job.
Just a little push.
It's like when you look out the window and you're like, wow, that's the outside. No, that's a piece of glass. You're outside. Not that piece of glass and you're outside. You know the effortless it is? It just seems impenetrable because, you know, you pull the shades tight and you set your alarm clock and
Yeah.
you sleep. You're sleeping next to glass. Like, it's hilarious. You feel
Yeah.
confident and
She's
you're
very
sleeping next to a
patient.
piece of fucking
Well,
glass.
there's this incredible complacency and arrogance that we are
Yes,
the
you
apex
could.
and pinnacle of the human story, that we're the best that's ever come, and that's a danger. Mythologically, that is a very dangerous place to be. When you start imagining yourself as the
Oh man,
pinnacle of everything,
That's funny.
precisely when the
That's
universe
really
finds
funny,
that
man.
it's really not that at all.
Yeah, it's a very weird existence that we have where we just sort of
Oh, that's
look
funny.
at how things are right now, and we can't imagine things being any different. No matter what, whether it's people that have to come to the realization that they've been injured.
Teach me the ways of the
It's like,
Jedi.
it just doesn't compute. Like, how come I can't walk anymore?
I'm
The
like
reality
Luke
is
when he
that
fucking meets Yoda
this
right now. I'm
reality
not
that
calling
we
you
have,
Yoda,
this
but
fairly
I'm.
healthy
That's
Earth,
what it
could
is.
shift at any
It's like
moment.
I'm like the impatient,
Yellowstone volcano
whiny
is what's
Luke,
been freaking me out the most over the last few years.
and you're wise like Yoda.
An interesting parallel would be if we look at small, what happens in smaller towns, like we've seen today.
Oh, that's nice, man.
For
I got your
example,
back too, man.
Katrina hit New Orleans, right? It was almost as if the human species separated into two subspecies. You had one
That's
group
nice.
of people that rose to the occasion.
Yeah, man, you can make
did
millions
heroically,
with
organized
this
and
life
saved
insurance
people
and investment
spontaneously, you know,
license
because the
and
government
job.
was
Not job, but
conspicuously absent for
license.
5 days, the first 5 days of the Katrina
You can make
disaster.
millions,
You had
man.
a major flooding of New Orleans, and you had people spontaneously organizing and performing these heroic
I've made $0,
saving their fellow man and
but
doing
you
just
can make millions.
stupendous things, superhero things.
I'm not joking. I'm
Then
serious. You
had
can.
Another segment of the population that just went completely barbaric, and you had mass rapes and smashing of.
You just got to talk to a lot of
businesses and
people.
looting and just people running in wild, complete, unrestrained gangs, and just committing violent acts at random. So.
And America, the richest country on earth, did not
Oh,
manage
fuck
that
you.
crisis well.
No.
I mean, it was very,
No.
and that was a little crisis by comparison with what we're talking
You
about.
remember when Kanye West
Please.
got on TV? George Bush does not
Why?
like black people.
Oh, I don't remember that, but yeah, George Bush, I think, was on day 4. George Bush.
It's
flew
just
over
too
an
much.
airport
It's too much, my
out the
friends.
window.
Wave.
Yeah.
It's too much.
But there's a lessons in those kinds of events.
Sure. Yeah, we're
Because
not prepared.
And we have to extrapolate from that. And if you go back, I oftentimes as a thought exercise think how would we respond if we knew that there was a high probability of a younger Dryas type event or series of events impending in our future?
What would you do? Start drinking or?
Well,
What
it
can you
depends.
do?
It all depends on lead time.
Right.
It all depends on lead time.
What if it's a 10-day lead time? Like, you're not going to be able to shoot a rocket up there.
Listen, man, fire up that Uber again unless
Just go hard to the end.
Yeah.
10 days. But 10 years or 20 years,
Then we can do some stuff.
then we can do some stuff.
The real scary thing is, there's two scary things. One, if you survived, because you're like, fuck. You know, if you really did survive and everybody else was jacked, and all of a sudden you're dealing with some Mad Max type reality where people are starving to death and they're very desperate and they become almost like animals. That's entirely inside the realm of possibility.
Well, that's what we learned from Katrina.
Or the other terrifying possibility is that you leave the future of civilization up to those other people. Is that they survive and they have kids and their kids survive, and somehow or another, somewhere along the line, we get better and better at understanding our place here, which is what I think has happened.
Yeah.
And all it would take is one. I mean, this is, as much as people are complaining right now, and as much as there's riots in the streets protests in the street, some riots apparently, but over the president-elect, what this time is, it represents the greatest time in history when it comes to safety, when it comes to knowledge, access to information, the way we understand each other. I don't think it's ever been better, as long as we know.
We have everything at our feet.
Yeah.
There's incredible potential in modern civilization. But the problem is that there's also very rigid mind control. The way that our societies work, it's turning people into drones. People brought up to believe that their only purpose in existence is production and consumption. That the people forced to fit into a sort of narrow place in the machine, mass media beaming, messages at us all the time. Even the concept of democracy is absurd. When you don't have complete transparency, when there are secrets, when things are hidden, how can the people vote, with a clear mind, and if a lot is being hidden from them? That's not democracy. Democracy is in fact invested in mind control, most unfortunate development.
Well, I wonder how long it's going to take before the rigid mindsets that are in place right now, and this idea of this resistance to change that we were talking about when it comes to science, when it comes to accepting this asteroidal impact theory. And I think that exists in politics. I think it exists in religion. I think it exists socially, the way we approach relationships and friendships. All of it is evolving in front of our eyes. I was watching a movie last night. Not another teenage movie. Is that what it is? Is that what it's called? And I was live tweeting it. So I was smoking pot and writing. And sometimes I just like to have the TV on and not listen to it. Just sometimes I like to
I got the stupid boost.
Sometimes. That last night
It was fast.
to do it that way, and I just got so enamored in this weird movie from 2001. The movie felt like a time machine. It's like I was watching this culture that does not exist anymore. It's one of those teenager movies where they're like in college and they're drinking. There's a lot of naked women and really racist, sexist humor, and it's really crude and goofy and stupid. And I'm like, this is so bizarre because this doesn't exist anymore. This kind of film, this is like Al Jolson with blackface on or something. And in a way, it's like a cultural time machine. Like you get to go and for a brief moment see like this comedy that somebody concocted in 2001, which seems so recent, but it's in that film you get evidence of this weird cultural change, or I shouldn't say weird, massive cultural change that's happened as far as the way we're allowed to joke around about things. Like this was racist shit in that movie. Like racist and sexist shit, and violence, like men punching women in the face and shit, like that you can't really do in a comedy today. And that's only 15 years ago. And what is it going to be like if we can avoid getting hit by a rock, blowing ourselves up, Yellowstone blowing up in our face? If we can keep going, I think we're on a great path, regardless of what people think about the president-elect. And
I think we're on a great path. It's a hazardous path. It's a path where the future is not at all certain. But humanity is at one of those moments, those crossroads where you kind of stand on the edge of an abyss and you don't quite know what lies ahead. And we can take a really great path out of this, or we can take a really horrible path out of this. And I think the key issue is that we do actually have choice. It doesn't have to be that way. I see a lot that's positive out there in the world. I do think people are waking up. I think they are questioning old structures. They're refusing to put up with the bullshit any longer. More and more people are doing that. It's happening in the realm of politics. It's happening in the realm of dealing with the big corporations. It's happening in the realm of investigating the past. We're just not going to be told what to think anymore. That's encouraging, but then on the other side, there are huge efforts being put precisely into making people think in certain ways, whether it's the advertising industry, whether it's political messages, and so we have to be aware of that. And it could go down the drone path. I mean, like the beehive path, which would be, why even bother to be human if your society is turning you into a worker drone and a beehive-life existence? Or it could go down an expansion of consciousness and a realization of the incredible, beautiful potential of the human race.
I honestly feel like that's where it's going.
I do too.
honestly feel
I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic.
Well, that's beautiful to hear, because this is a time, like I was watching a John Oliver show. It's a great show on HBO, very funny guy, and he's very left-wing leaning, as is his show, but they had this fuck 2016 thing where they were just naming off all the horrible things that happened in 2016, and then just saying goodbye to this terrible year. I'm like, yeah, but a lot of good shit happened this year too. There's a lot of fantastic discoveries, a lot of interesting observations, a lot of people learned a lot of things in 2016 as well. And I think that,
And quite a number of American states have made cannabis legal.
yes, that's, I think,
It's a huge development.
it's also it's going to be a big factor in our cultural evolution. It really will.
Well, it was a big factor. In the 60s, it was a huge factor. In effect, what happened, you had a very closed conservative society, and then you had an outside shock in the form of the psychedelic drugs that came in and completely stirred up everything in art and music and fashion, and even into scientific concepts of our place in the universe and time and space, and in so many ways that had just a major impact on the direction that our society went. And what would be the equivalent today, or in our near future, in terms of an outside shock that would suddenly wake people up, would be another Tunguska. And based upon everything that I've seen, it would suggest that events like that are going to happen, and probably.
Yo, what's up, Aaron? How you doing? I'm gonna be back in a minute, buddy.
Especially if the message of the story has been out and enough people have heard it. 5% of the people or 10% of the people are aware that there is this major impending potential paradigm shift, and then we have an event like that, an event like Tunguska 1908. I think that's all it would take, because the magnitude of that event would have been such that it occurred today, and you had anywhere from 1 million to 2 million people instantly wiped out, or a whole city instantly annihilated from a shot from space. What effect would that have on the planetary consciousness?
And which, with this latest exercise, NASA coming late to the party finally seems to be thinking about. What happened if LA is hit by, a 350-foot diameter?
Right, and that's
bit
the
of a
thing,
comet.
is because when the probability models for a Tunguska type event were first laid out in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, it was pretty much determined that it was like something that would happen once a millennium, once every couple of millenniums. Then it sort of got contracted to once every few centuries. It may be that it's actually much more like 1 or 2 a century, or maybe even perhaps clustered events where you may have 3 or 4 or half a dozen of those type events occurring over a very short window of time. But an event like that happening, not one that would cause the extinction of civilization by any means, but an event like that could, wipe out 1,000 square miles of landscape completely in an instant, would have a major effect, I think, on the people of this planet.
It would focus minds.
It would focus minds in a way that nothing else would. And it's not, to me, is it pessimistic to say that might be what it's going to take, or is it just realistic? I don't know.
Well, I think it's like the massive impact versus the slow trickle effect. I mean, is it going to happen eventually, or is it going to happen in one gigantic swoop because of an event like a asteroidal impact where it kills a bunch of people and we wake up to the fragility of our existence?
But either way, it's a waking up of humanity, and that is in process.
It's happening.
That is in process now. Look, as a Brit, observing what's been happening in America as an outsider, I'm enormously encouraged by the legalization of cannabis movement that is taking place here, and what it all means. sure, I like to smoke a joint, but this is not about getting high. It's not about recreation. What this is about is recognizing the sovereignty of adults to make decisions over their own bodies, their own health, and their own consciousness while doing no harm to others. That's what it's about, and that's a really fucking important issue. That is, for me, that is the most important issue, because if we live in a society that is not prepared to recognize adult sovereignty over one's own body and one's own consciousness, then that cannot be a free society in any meaningful way. And so I applaud the people of America in those states who have voted for full legalization. That's a brilliant thing to do, and that's going to have an impact around the world, because the war on drugs, all the ideology and lies about cannabis are all going to be proved wrong. We're going to know that the emperor wears no clothes, that you can legalize cannabis and civilization does not fall apart, as the war on drugs lobby have been telling us for ages. It's going to change everything, and it's a beautiful thing because it's the American people, whereas the American state, America as a governmental state presence on the world stage, has been the dark force behind the war on drugs. So it's for me a beautiful thing that it's the American people, state by state, who are winding that back and saying, we will not put up with this shit anymore.
I think what you were talking about earlier is really important too. We were talking about different factions of our civilization are creating, to this day, they're still creating disinformation and still trying to mislead people. But I think that goes to what we were talking about before, where it's a system and systems protect themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
they develop almost a consciousness of their own. It's scary in a way.
Yeah.
Big bureaucracies, armed bureaucracies, they've got a kind of personality.
Well, even when there's no financial stake in it, there's just a social stake, like what you're seeing right now with the left versus the right.
Yeah.
Like there's some people, like my friend Wanda Sykes just got booed off stage at something last night apparently, where she went on some anti-Trump rant, and people got super upset at her. There's these systems that are in place. This almost like wanting to fight. Like it's not. It sets us up in this bizarre team mentality where this left protects its ideas of the future and the right protects its ideas. And I'm watching these people go at it back and forth on social media, and it's toxic. And I don't like to use that term because it's so compromised by, toxic sexuality or toxic masculinity. There's so many uses of that word in our culture. But I think that this desire to fight with each other.
Yeah, and be deeply unpleasant and say really horrible, hurtful, ghastly things. You see it so often, and really, vile.
And from the left too, as well as the right. The left is supposed
toxic.
to be the
Toxic's the right word.
Exactly. And I think that we have to resist the urge to fight. I think this is when people push too far on the left, that's when the alt-right emerges. When people push too far on the right, that's when the left comes up, and that's when Kent State emerges. You have all these weird factions duking it out that have so much in common.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the things that they don't have in common, it's either because of an ignorance or it's because of an ideological dispute or a lack of communication. And I think if those three things are in place, at least open lines of communication, which is also fostered by marijuana. You get these people talking openly and vulnerably about these things, and you find out that a lot of our misgivings and our misunderstandings about each other are just misconceptions, miscommunications, and even if we disagree on things, I have friends that I disagree on a lot of stuff with, but we're very close.
Yeah.
Because you're allowed to have different opinions.
Of course, that's what makes the world interesting.
It doesn't have to be we hate each other because one person's
we
left.
can listen to somebody else's opinion with empathy rather than with hatred or anger.
It's too attractive to be on a team. Like the fucking Masons.
It's the herd mentality.
Yeah, it is, man. It's too attractive. It's too attractive, and we love city versus city. We love that. We love when Chicago is going to take on Cleveland. Fuck you. We love that.
It's the tribal thing. We've not really evolved out of that. We've changed our social structures, but we're still tribal mentality. Nationalism is just tribalism writ large. That's all it is.
It really is. Just like religion's just a cult with a lot more people.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Should we look at one more?
Yeah, we could look at as many as you want, man.
Oh.
Roll the party. What do you got?
Yeah, let's see the next one.
Back to the flood.
This is the place that I didn't get to take Greg, that I really wanted to.
Okay.
I really wanted to take you.
Let's see it.
So you're going to see it second best.
Okay.
Awesome. This is the potholes. Okay.
Holy shit.
Look at that.
This is crazy. What we're looking at, folks, the people who are just listening in, you have to go to the YouTube now because this is insanity. This is as close, for a dummy like me, to look at something like that and then go, oh, yeah, that's definitely a river. A river carved that.
Okay, what you're looking at there is a gigantic, extinct set of cataracts, like you would find at Niagara Falls, but to use Graham's term, writ large. We're looking at a ridge. We're looking east. The tsunami wave that swept down over these 4 states, one branch of it swept off to the west. This particular branch of it was 400 feet deep when it hit this ridge. And what it did was it spilled over the ridge, and down here in the foreground you see the modern-day Columbia River. From the top of the ridge, where you see the agriculture and the landscape, down to the river is about 1,000 feet.
Wow.
So you basically have to picture, you've got this huge sheet of water, 300 to 400 feet deep. It's rushing over, and it finds the lowest spot within this ridge, and that's where it starts focusing its energy. And as it does, it begins to just strip away the rock. Now, what you're looking at here is this cataract complex is about 5 miles across. And the water came, and you see you've got those kind of curved finger lakes at the top.
And those tunnels.
Those are potholes.
That's insane.
Potholes are formed by underwater turbulence. And in a flood this swiftly moving with this much turbulence, you literally have vorticular eddies, high intensity, high amplitude, high energy underwater tornadoes, literally underwater tornadoes. Now, these underwater tornadoes are typically, in this case, about a half a mile wide.
Oh my God.
And they're spinning at a high rate of speed, and they're right there, they're probably 600 feet deep. Because the water pouring over the ridge is at least 200, and you can see what it's done to the bedrock.
Anybody listening, you gotta look at this. You have to look at this and then listen to the scale.
This is a gigantic scar in the landscape, of which there are hundreds around this
and
region.
The exact location, Randall?
This is Potholes Cataract.
Right.
The exact location.
Yeah. Somebody wants to get to it, which we're in Washington State still?
Yes, we're in Washington State. Central Washington. It's going to be right on the Columbia River, just below Wenatchee.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Wenatchee,
where we saw that huge erratic, that
yes, very
giant
close.
18,000-ton boulder brought there, enchained in an iceberg floating on the flood, an iceberg the size of an oil tanker carrying an 18,000-ton boulder, carried on the flood, grounds 700 feet up a valley side, rests there as the floodwaters recede, the ice melts away, and the boulder is left sitting there.
We're going to look at a picture
shit.
of that boulder in a second.
What do the people back in this part of the country, what do they think about this?
Well, you know, they're only just catching on to what they're sitting on top of.
Jesus
The first time I went out here in '98, there was the Ice Age Floods Institute, and I went to their only location, which was in the Better Business Bureau in Moses Lake, Washington, and they had one room in the back of this Better Business Bureau, or no, Chamber of Commerce, and there was 2 elderly ladies in there who were basically the overseers of the group. Now there's about 24 chapters, and every year there's several guided field trips led by geologists who are studying this in their off time. And I've been on a number of these just to participate and get the access to the geologists in order to pick their brains. But this is very close to Wenatchee, Washington. So if anybody's wanting to find this on Google Earth, this is a Google Earth image. Now what we're going to do, but before we leave the Google Earth image, I was going to explain that you got those, see those lakes, those meandering lakes up there? What you got to picture is you've got a sheet of water coming. And as it's coming over this ridge, it's beginning to selectively erode into fault lines and cracks within the bedrock. Can you picture that? The water is going to naturally try to go into those low spots where there's cracks and fissures, and it'll start going from a sheet into channeling. What goes from sheet to a channel, then that spills over the ridge. And in the middle, you see this, it's called a rock blade. See that? The rock blade is that, yes, that's it right there, separating the 2 alcoves. If the flood had continued for another few days, that rock blade would have been gone, and you would have had a single alcove up there. Now, in the next, as this proceeds, what we're going to do is we're going to go down, and we're going to be right at the head of the rock blade. Right there, yeah, right there. We're standing right there. So now you're going to get to see, as the drone is about to take off. You're seeing the landscape. We're looking to the east in the direction of those Finger Lakes. I guess the soundtrack.
Is it not playing in the sound?
No, oh, there we go.
You want to hear it?
A little toccata and fugue in D minor.
Ooh. Okay, and the landscape opens up. So you're on that rock blade.
We're on the rock blade right
Okay,
there.
that's
So
what-
now you can begin to see the scale of this thing that we were just seeing from Google Earth.
Well, now when you describe it, I mean, I would have just looked at it and go, wow, that's kind of cool looking. I would have never have thought,
See,
oh, that was obviously created by water pouring through.
That's the problem, is because we haven't had the scale of perception. It took Brett's 25 years to put the pieces together.
Well, also, we haven't been able to take these sort of high-resolution photographs
Pause
from
there,
drones
Jamie.
right above it till recently.
Yeah, it gives us a whole other insight. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to be $1,000 an hour to get up there in a helicopter. Now you can fly a drone around, you know. it's
With a
amazing.
phone.
Yeah, exactly.
With GoPro on it.
Right here in the middle ground, you see that big hole? That's about 200 feet in diameter. That's a pothole that was created by this swirling vortex of massively turbulent water.
Holy shit, this is incredible.
And
In other words, the evidence is all over the landscape,
All
staring
over
us in the eyes, and it's only in the recent years that it's started to make sense.
We've evolved the eyes to be able to see this. And so now by going out here with a drone, I've been over this landscape several times in a small plane to see it from that perspective. But now, like he just said, like Graham just said, now we've got a drone that can go up and see it from a whole different perspective. And now you can see the man standing right down there on the rock.
No.
Do you see him?
Oh, that little dude? Yeah.
That little dude.
Yeah.
That little dude is 6 feet tall. He's not that little.
I mean, on the picture, he's little.
No, in
sure
real
he's a
life, he's
regular-sized
actually only
person.
4 inches in height. it's an illusion.
What's to me stunning, I mean, this is really beautiful and cool and everything like that, but what's really stunning is the initial picture, where it becomes so obvious, that above picture where you see the
Yeah.
farmland and that just, it's so obviously cut.
Sliced out of the landscape.
Well, let's see the rest of it then. As the drone flies over, yeah. So, and then we have what's called classic scabland. You see all these mounds, these kind of lumps? That's what are the scabs on the scabland. That's why it's called scabland.
And again, it's flooding that causes it.
Plucking,
Differentially
yeah.
plucking material off the surface.
Wow. This is incredible, and then there's water remaining.
Yeah, they fill the potholes, yeah.
God.
There you get a sense.
Oh my God.
There you get a sense of the rock blade.
Well, there you get a sense of what the volume of water must have looked like when it was rushing through there.
Right, and see, this is just,
Holy shit.
we've looked at 2 features now, Camas Prairie and Potholes Cataract. We could sit here for the next 10 hours looking at dozens and dozens of these mega features. And you look at, there's a whole bar. This is gravel down here.
Over there.
And
Okay.
look at, see the giant ripples
Yeah.
on it? You see those?
Yeah.
I've never seen those reported in the literature. It may be that nobody's ever really seen them before.
Or no one's ever paid attention.
Nobody's ever paid attention, but there they are.
So what is mainstream science used to describe this sort of, or mainstream archaeology used to describe these features?
This would be geology. Well,
Did I say
catastrophic
archaeology?
flooding.
Yeah. So they believe this is catastrophic flooding as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
They just think it's a slower.
They think it's lots of small catastrophic floods. Not one big catastrophic flood.
And what kind of timeline are these geologists putting on this?
Oh, 2,000 or 3,000 years.
And why do they think that?
Well, because of the ice dammed model and how much time it would take. See, it gets complicated.
And because until the comet research, there was no credible source of heat that could melt that amount of ice and cause that.
Right.
Now that's the new factor that's come into the
Right.
equation.
Now you look at the people standing on the cliff edge there, the edge of the rock. Do you see them down there?
Yeah.
So now you get the sense of
Scale.
what would survive again in the aftermath.
Not
of
that dude.
No, not that dude. Not that dude or his buddies.
Yeah. This is a crazy place, man. It's crazy to look at. It's just so, when you were looking above it, like even here, I mean, you get a sense of it, but if you had just showed this to me, quite honestly, I probably wouldn't have pieced that together. But when you look at it, the original image, it's so blatantly obvious.
Right. Well, that's the thing now, is we are in this position where we can see it. And when I take people out in the field, what I do is I prep them first by showing these images from NASA, the satellite photography, the Google Earth imagery, aerial photography, then ground photography, and then you go out in the landscape. And at that point, you can start having this framework for understanding what you're seeing. Otherwise, you just don't. The scale of it is too vast.
It's amazing. It's really amazing.
And this is, you know, this is an adventure of exploration that we're just getting launched on. This is recovering the lost past of humanity. And if I may, I want to make a pitch again for the Comet Research Group. If anybody, I think it's really important. It's not just a matter of funding their research. It's also a matter of sending a message that we, the people, are prepared to take matters into our own hands and support those scientists who are working with open minds, inquiring into the past. And whether you know, give $1 or $100 or whatever, any little counts. It says it's the voice of the people as much as the money that really matters. These guys, the Comet Research Group, they need their research funding. They have an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. You can go to my website, press the Comet Research Group banner. It will take you to a page with all the relevant links. Please consider supporting it. It's valid, it's worthwhile, it's worthy work, and it has the potential to change the whole story of our past and our future.
And it's a story that would be incredibly exciting to be a part of. And that's what I'm trying to get people to think. Look, there's this thing happening, and it is democratic in its own way. And you don't have to be some specialist or particular authority in some branch of academically approved science to begin to appreciate and understand this.
Well, you're a human being.
Getting out into the field and seeing this kind of stuff firsthand, getting it into the discussion, into debate, and spending more time on this because it's such an interesting story.
And that's what the scientists at the Comet Research Group are offering, that the people who contribute will participate in certain ways in this research
awesome.
in the future.
Well, we're all, what I was going to say is we're all human beings. We're a part of this planet. We are pedestrians walking along we're being carried by this planet. And all this stuff is our right. It's your right to understand what the history of this crazy rock has gone through.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing stuff.
And the perspective to understand this is like this. For 12,000 years, this story has been written into the landscape of the Earth. And only now are we able to step back and begin to see the big picture in tandem with ever greater detail. And what's emerging is really, it's a really wild tale, but the evidence is there to support it completely.
And this is the story I've told in Magicians of the Gods. This is recovering this lost memory.
It really is wild. And our time here on this planet has been confusing for so many reasons. And one of the big ones is not understanding how we got here. And that's one of the reasons why your book, I think, is so important to me. Just give you this new perspective of how this sort of civilization emerged. Another problem that I think we deal with all the time is light pollution. I think light pollution.
We never see the start.
I think it's really a perspective blocker in a big way.
No, it absolutely is. Randall and I were having a discussion earlier about how ancient cultures related to the cosmos. As above, so below. They felt themselves connected with the cosmos. They made their monuments in alignment with key celestial bodies. They did it very carefully. There was a sense of bringing down the enchantment of the heavens onto Earth. In modern societies, we can't even see the stars. You live in the middle of a big city, the stars are gone. The light pollution just blots them out. You never think they're there, and you forget actually that you're part of a majestic cosmos. Everything about it is mystery. We are immersed in mystery from the moment we're born to the moment we die, and yet our society is telling us, oh, it's all very prosaic and dull, and it's just about production and
Everything's
consumption.
all explained, so you don't really need to worry yourself about it too much, because some authority somewhere has it all figured out.
No one has it all figured out. It's not possible. I think everybody owes it to themselves to go out into the desert in the middle of when you know there's a stretch where the moon is not going to be out and there's going to be clear skies, especially if you live in Southern California. You can get out to the desert pretty easy. Just get out away from all the cities and just look up, and it'll freak you out. It'll freak you out because it's one of those things that you kind of really take for granted, because most of the time the sky is just a dark black featureless thing with a couple little white dots that aren't really that compelling. But when you get out there and you see the actual Milky Way itself, you go, oh, holy shit.
Well, see, now we could have, every year there's probably a dozen high altitude events that could have been witnessed by ancient peoples that we are completely oblivious to because of our urban existence, because of light pollution, because nobody is really looking at the sky. But these high altitude events would be essentially equivalent to like Hiroshima-sized bombs going off 20 miles up.
And we miss
just
those?
outside, especially like if it's in the daytime and you're not looking right up there,
that's right,
you're
it
not going to
happened
see
in
it.
the daytime.
And at night, if you're living in the city, if you're inside, the light pollution, by the time it happens, it's over. But if you're out in a completely wilderness area where you've got visual access to the stars and you're aware of that and you're constantly aware of the presence of the sky, you're going to see much more of that kind of thing happening. Then, if the cosmos decides to get a little bit more active, which it apparently does from time to time, suddenly the sky is now becomes a major factor in your existence, your tribal existence, your cultural existence, especially if in those episodes you have multiple fireball type events that could be on the scale of anywhere from Chelyabinsk up to Tunguska, and that's what Klub and Napier, that's their scenario, is these clusters of
we enter episodes of bombardment. When we are passing through a filament of the Taurid meteor stream that's thick with heavy debris, asteroids of a kilometer or more in diameter. When we enter those filaments, we are entering a period of episodic bombardment when human civilization is at risk. And according to their calculations, we are entering one of those filaments in the next 30 years.
Jesus.
And that's why we need to pay attention to this, because 30 years is enough time to do something about it. If we apply the resources of our civilization to this, we can solve this problem.
Let's look at a couple more pictures, because I'd like to get the picture of Graham.
People are too busy making new phones. They don't have time to fix the asteroid thing.
Exactly.
We need a phone that projects images and holograms.
That's my my contention, that it's going to take
well,
a little
but then
nudge.
but again, those the serious commercial talk of mining asteroids, that is the way into this. That if they can see an economic return for them in it, then maybe they'll do the good thing actually for the human race.
Would this have to be a manned expedition like Bruce Willis in that asteroid movie?
Not necessarily.
No. Okay. What's the image that we want to show?
Well, Jamie, why don't you go to the folder of the one we opened?
Folder of awesomeness.
The folder of awesomeness. Yeah, just let's start with 1007.
What are we going to look at here?
Well, we're going to look at some NASA stuff.
Oh, cool.
And then we'll look at a couple of Google Earth things, and then we will look at a couple of U.S. Geological Survey things, and then we'll look at some photographs. 5 minutes worth. Okay, let's do it.
What do we got? Whoa.
Okay.
Holy shit.
This is one of the early NASA photographs taken from 500 miles up, back in the late 70s, actually. And what we got here is the two big scabland tracts that show two of the big meltwater streams that have left their scars in the landscape. So each one of those varies roughly between 10 and 20 miles wide. And the bigger one on the right is probably 50 to 60 miles long, or actually a little bit longer than that. But you can actually see that when the water swept down from the north out of British Columbia, it washed away 200 feet, roughly, 1 to 200 feet of the existing topsoil. It had covered the basalt bedrock, right? Basalt bedrock, by the way, that was originally formed by eruptions of the Yellowstone caldera, interestingly. But so the water came down, swept away the topsoil, and left the bare, dark basalt exposed down below. The feature that we just looked at is not even really in this NASA photograph. It's over to the west. But let's go ahead to the next one, Jamie.
That's the Snake River down there, which is
yes.
Where's the Snake River?
Snake River comes up out of Idaho, and it joins the Columbia, and then flows out to the Pacific Ocean. All right, then we got a Google Earth image coming up. Oh, okay.
On order, because there's a lot of here.
Oh, okay.
Tell me which number you want me to pull up.
Be 1008, 1008, the next one.
What's going on with our TV? It keeps going off and on.
That TV is not really made for the way we use it, so it doesn't like it. I just turned it off, so I can pull up the next one.
Okay.
There we go. So now we're getting actually a bigger view of the landscape, and you can see the two meltwater It's a scabland track.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then you have what's called
No one can hear you if you do this. Just tell me where it is. I get it.
Okay, so there's the two scabland tracks.
Right.
Then you've got the Grand Coulee, which is that dark ribbon going up to Columbia River there. Grand Coulee Dam is right, you almost had it. It's where the Columbia River suddenly gets skinny. Right there, that's Grand Coulee Dam. That's the widest, the most massive concrete dam in North America. And it's impounding water in Franklin Delano Roosevelt Lake to about 400 feet deep. Right? Now, all of the area at the top, the glacier, the green mountainous area, this was all covered in ice. And then over to the left, right there, you have that brown area, and do you see the kind of semicircular arc of dark ground right there? Yes. That is where a tongue of the ice came out of Canada, and it stopped right there. And when it receded, when it melted back, what it did was it left all this rubble that can't really be farmed effectively. It's called till, glacial till. And where the glacier ended, that's called moraine. And you can see it's circular where the glacier came. And then coming right off the snout of the glacier, do you see kind of a ribbony? That's a giant scar in the landscape that was formed by a meltwater stream coming off of that ice sheet. It's called Moses Coulee.
Hey, Randall, I think we should keep in mind a lot of the audience aren't actually seeing the visuals on this.
They're not.
And, I mean, the takeaway is that all across the Pacific Northwest is a landscape that has been utterly scarred and devastated by gigantic flood that took place 12,000 years. It's left its marks everywhere.
And this is right near Coeur d'Alene. So Coeur d'Alene is from that? That's the residue of this
You see Coeur
melted-
d'Alene right there. If people go to the Geocosmic Rex website or the Sacred Geometry International website, they can see most of the images that we're showing
Well,
here.
they'll see it if they watch the YouTube video. They can watch it and hear you talk about it at the same time. It's just the vast majority, probably 90% of our
are
people
not
just
seeing
listen.
the visuals right now. Okay.
But they can. And so
Okay,
they probably will. So
they can go to that and watch it. You can look down, way down on the lower left is the Potholes Cataract. Right. Go up a little, up along the river, come down south, keep coming, stop. Look to the right of the river. That's what we were just...
This man knows his landscapes.
To the right. To the right, Jamie.
Jamie, how dare you? Yeah, this whole area, so we get it. This whole area has been absolutely, unequivocally,
right,
undeniably.
So as you see this, Joe, and you realize the scale of what we just looked at, and now you're seeing that within this whole landscape that was essentially inundated. You'll start to get the scale of the thing, and that's what I'm trying to do here. If you, Joe, can get the scale of this in your mind, I've accomplished something.
Yeah, I think I got it from that one image. That was a real mind blower.
The ripples?
Yeah, the ripples.
Yeah.
The ripples were a real mind blower, and then the other one with the farmland, and then there's massive channel cut into it. You kind of get it.
Yeah. The ripples aren't even on this image. They're way to the east.
Has anybody sat down with you and tried to dispute this? I mean, the people that believe that this was a slow and gradual effect, has anybody sat down and tried to debate you on this?
No.
It seems like something that would be really interesting to debate. I mean, I would love to see someone who's a geologist that, I'm sure there's someone out there that is listening to this that may have a dispute with it.
You bet there is.
I'm sure, but I would love to see them talk to you about it and go over all the various things, the nuclear glass that they find, all of it, from top to bottom.
Here's the thing, Joe. At this point, nobody is connecting the work of the Comet Research Group with the Missoula flood effects that we're looking at, or
Except
all
us.
the rest.
Except us.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Most people are like, that's crazy. How's it possible?
Because it's
There's
the
only a
missing
few
link.
people.
It's such an obvious connection, and it really merits exploration.
Here's what scares the shit out of me. What if you guys didn't exist? What if you guys were never born? What if you never wrote that book? What if you never been freaking out about this shit your whole life? How would I know about this?
How many times in the human story has this happened, where stuff has just not been explored that really needed to be?
That sounds crazy to something like a Michael Shermer, to a skeptical person.
Well, I'd say to Michael Shermer, come on, man, let's go spend a week out in that landscape.
Well, he does want to debate you. He wants to sit down and debate you, Graham.
All right.
Can we set that up?
We can set that up.
I would love it.
Yeah. That sounds like fun.
Yes, it would be a good time.
Yeah.
Well, in my mind, there's really no arguing with this this evidence. I mean,
Well,
it's
it
too
seems-
overwhelming. And the question really comes down to, at this point, nobody disputes that there were catastrophic floods. The question is, what was the mechanism? How many were there?
How long did it take?
How long did it take? Was it a bunch of catastrophic but smaller floods? Or was it back to Brett's original model of one giant flood? And I think the truth actually lies somewhere between the two. And it, again, the geology gets complicated, but I'm writing it up. So I will explain in detail what my thoughts are, and after having crisscrossed thousands of miles of this landscape repeatedly and basically absorbed every piece of scientific literature ever written on it, I've evolved some ideas about what could have happened here and how it happened.
Well, I was a grown adult, and I found out that North America, most of it was by, what was it, 10, 12,000 years ago, was covered by a mile-high sheet of ice.
Yes.
But I was a grown adult, and I went,
North
what?
America, roughly north of Minneapolis.
Yeah.
And that's common knowledge, right? I mean, everybody knew that. Anybody who's actually studied the history of it, but it never made it to my dopey head until I was a grown adult, and then I went, wait a minute. What? And the idea in my mind that this whole thing was covered just 12,000 years ago. That seems so incredibly recent.
And by the way, that ice was more like 2 miles deep. Consider the weight of those ice masses pressing down. I mean, anything that was there before the ice came down would have been ground to powder.
Yeah.
And then as the ice cataclysmically melts, everything below it is washed away forever.
It's like an eraser for the world.
Yeah,
An eraser. See, that's a great phrase, an eraser for the world. And that is the thing that so many of the skeptics haven't factored into their thinking when they're going, well, where's the evidence?
Yeah.
The evidence, as you've got to understand, is that we have to rethink the possibility of evidence once we know that there has been these erasers of the world that have transpired. And not just once, but I mean, what we're looking at here is probably the most severe events in the last 5 million years. And I have a reason for using that number, 5 million.
What's the reason?
Well, the reason is based upon the severity.
Oh, hey guys, sorry I fell asleep. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna play anymore tonight. I'm sorry, dudes. Juan to Mario, Sour Stash Baron, thanks for being here. Sorry, guys.
Require extraordinary evidence. Is there anything more extraordinary than that image of those farmlands and that giant swath cut into the land?
Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I'm signing off. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. You're the best. Thank you.
Pretty extraordinary. And then the core samples.
Excuse me.
The core samples that show this massive fluctuation of temperature.
Sad. Oh, sorry, man. No, dude. I'm like. Sorry, man. I hope you were like here.
Yes, it's all there.
I fell
It
asleep,
obviously
man.
all leads, even to someone like me, it leads to an event.
And this cataclysmic episode immediately
sorry,
precedes
man.
the time when we've been told that
I
civilization
can't do it
began.
anymore.
Yeah.
That's the other point, which is really
I'm just
important.
gonna
We
sign
have
off,
this
too.
huge punctuation mark, and then civilization suddenly starts to evolve. No, it was there before. This is a reinvention.
Those hunter-gatherers, like those people that you would watch in one of those shows where they survive in Alaska.
I
You
fell
watch those
asleep
shows?
at 11,
Those
yeah.
shows are great, like Life Below Zero. Those crazy assholes.
Painful. This
Yeah.
forced
Those
stuck.
people would make it. Those
It's
people
just
would
too
make it,
much.
and they would breed and they would carry on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
What
I
is
really
that? What's
appreciate. I really appreciate it. I gotta
Just
go.
say it.
Next image.
Thanks.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, Joe.
No worries, no worries.
Have a good night.
Look at this. Wow. Okay, so that to me, I'm looking at this after what you've told me. That looks like water that has sort of like receded and left these lines in this hillside.
exactly.
See you later.
Think of a
Thanks for
bathtub,
being
Rick.
here, guys.
Yeah.
And
After
girls,
Joe, you
appreciate
get
it.
in there and you
GG,
take
thanks,
a bath,
man.
and the water is
Thanks, dude.
basically brown with sediment.
What
and then
kind
as it
of
declines
fucking
away, it
baths are you
leaves
taking?
bathtub
Good night.
rings.
I'll talk to you soon. I'll be
You leaving
streaming soon
sediment
again.
in your tub? Hey man,
And you're
Thanks.
quoting Genesis, and the waters prevailed.